Okay. I think we're live on all platforms here, gang. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, we're going to be talking about Israel Palestine. And I know, we've talked about this before. It's been done to death. But one, it's still a very important issue. It's very relevant, and it deserves um, space to be discussed. Two, since the last time we talked about this on this channel, there's been many new developments, both in the war itself, as well as within things like the ICJ releasing their report, the UN releasing their sexual violence report. There's been other things that have come to light that deserve their time in the sun, so to speak. Tonight, we're going to be covering a wide variety of issues regarding the conflict, including: is Israel perpetrating its genocide right now? Are they an apartheid state? Is the West's response to what Israel and Palestine are going through, is it appropriate? What would be an appropriate response? These things and more, right? We're gonna talk about that. But before we get too far into it, I do want to give a chance for my lovely guests to introduce themselves, kind of give an overview of their thoughts, and then we'll kind of just get into it. So I guess first we'll start with Kevin Logan. Kevin Logan, hello. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Mr. Wick?
So far, so good, but we haven't started yet. There's still plenty of time for things to go wrong. I'm here for it. What is your basic thoughts on the conflict? What do you think about Israel,
Yeah.
the way it's conducted itself, and about Palestine as a whole? Please go ahead.
Yes. I honestly think that the current onslaught, is the way I will describe it, is will be remembered as one of the truly great crimes of the 21st century. Even, I think it's a disgrace, a scar on humanity that needs to be come to a conclusion very very soon. My basic position is that I'm not a Zionist. And I'm not a Zionist for the same reason that I'm also not a white nationalist or a Hindu nationalist or anything of that sort. I think the idea of ethnic or religious supremacist states is immoral, unethical, and ultimately counterproductive in the long run. I think we'll probably get into it at some point during the discussion, but obviously the things that happened on October 7th were a disgrace as well, and terrorism. Innocent people were butchered and murdered. That does not, however, it seems to me, justify the killing of many tens of thousands of more people on the other side who are also largely innocent, even if one side wants to define all men in the area of between the ages of 15 and 40 or whatever it is as enemy combatants. They are not combatants. They are innocent people who just want to go about their lives.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I think undoubtedly
victory is
Israel is
ours!
engaged currently in a genocide in the Gaza Strip, and indeed ethnic cleansing in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. I think they are an apartheid state, and we'll get into the specifics of all of that as we go along, but that's basically my position.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm eager to see how this plays out. We appreciate you. Next up, Quibbles over coffee. Same thing. Introduce yourself, tell people who you are, and kind of just outline your position on Israel, Palestine, and the conflict as a whole, please.
Sure. So I'm my name is Quibbles slash Jonah. I don't know, whichever one you want to do with. Um, uh, yeah. So since October 7th, I've obviously had to give this a lot of thought. Um, and I think that the problem that I keep on coming to is that I think that there are certain terms that are used imprecisely in order to get to a broader sort of moral push, and I think that that is a somewhat dangerous thing to do when you use those terms in a way that is too loose. I think that we wield the term rape in a very specific sense, and there's a reason there's a difference between rape and sexual assault. There's a reason that there's a difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide. There's a reason that there's a difference between violence and even violence that is indefensible. and violence that is an ethnic cleansing, and violence that is a genocide. And so I want to be clear that when I say that something isn't a genocide, that doesn't mean that I'm defending it, number one. But number two, I also think that I'm concerned about the conversations that we have about Israel-Palestine often being about defining terms and being about trying to figure out, who we're going to condemn and how we're going to condemn them, rather than trying to move forward. I think it's a very easy thing to do as someone who is even remotely at a cursory level conscious of what's been happening in a situation as complicated as this one, to spend 15 hours condemning Hamas in 15 different ways, or spend 15 hours condemning, certainly Bibi Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli parliament. And I think that that's ultimately not as useful as trying to figure out what our steps forward are. And so my hope is that we're going to be able to have a conversation that's ultimately trying to move forward and ultimately trying to get to a point where we're actually figuring out how to take those steps.
Okay, I guess. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate that, and yeah, hopefully we can. I think the semantic discussion has its place, but hopefully we can kind of agree on some basic facts on the ground so we can move forward. I guess I'll start by asking you both, and again, this is just an open question to kind of spark discussion. To Kevin first. Obviously, you are not okay with the response from Israel after October 7th. My question would be, what would you have Israel do now? If you were king of Israel, right? If you were the head of the parliament there, what do you think would be the moral or ethical or right choice for Israel moving forward? Can you
Well, firstly,
lay that out for us?
if I were the leader of the Knesset, there would be various genocidal lunatics in that body that I would remove from that body for the good of all people. But regardless, that's a rather minor point. What would I have Israel do? Ultimately, in the same way that the situation in Northern Ireland was never sorted by violence, albeit it was pushed along by violence, of course, people need to get around the table and talk. That's the only way you can have a peaceable solution to this. However unpalatable that is. And we heard the same talking points about we don't negotiate with terrorists, we don't sit down with the IRA, etc., etc., from the same government who were surreptitiously doing exactly that. Because that's the way it goes. You have to have A, talks, and B, good faith from both sides. On some level, obviously you're going to have animosity. And unfortunately, you see in both Hamas and the sort of Likud religious bigots, frankly, no good faith at all. Neither Hamas nor the Israeli government actually want a solution to this, fundamentally. Bibi Netanyahu definitely doesn't want an end to the war, because as soon as that happens, he will be kicked out of office. And he knows that, and so he's going to continue doing this regardless. Hamas know that should the war go in the way that they don't want it to, or if they're forced to give up their only bargaining chip, which is these poor innocent fucking people who are being held hostage, they lose their power, they lose their base, and they're going to ultimately be wiped from the stage, albeit they're not going to disappear completely, but they will cease to be the government, functioning or otherwise, of Gaza. And so ultimately the negotiations that might be going on or might not be going on in the near future ultimately won't reach the conclusion that humanity needs them to reach, because Hamas don't want to see peace, and the ultra-Zionist freaks who currently run Israel don't want to see a two-state solution. They have made their mind up conclusively that they wish to, from the river to the sea, Israel is all there will be, and that's their position, and they're going to do that regardless. Because whilst, of course, we've been focusing a large part on the Gaza Strip, the settlement, encroachment, the stealing of both land and houses from Palestinians in the West Bank has continued. Not just unabated, but has actually increased. We've seen literally arms being given by the IDF to random fucking people in the West Bank to violently extort housing and land from Palestinian people. You need a good faith actor on behalf of Israel. Otherwise, this will just continue ad infinitum, and piece by piece they will destroy any chance of there being a two-state solution, which is the only chance for a lasting peace ultimately. So yeah, both the government of the West Bank and the government of Israel need substantial changes, which may or may not be possible or may not happen. But then you actually need two parties to sit down who actually want a solution, and unfortunately, we have neither of those things at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
yeah, so I certainly agree with you that definitely we need to be figuring out what it looks like to get to peace. I also agree with you that I don't think that Bibi Netanyahu is capable of doing that himself, and that he needs to be out of power. I want to be clear, democratically out of power, which I think is quite likely in the relatively near future. Not in the next 6 months, but in the next year and a half, 2 years. I also would say that Hamas, which literally in its charter says that every Jew, myself included, needs to be dead, is also not capable of this kind of thing. So if we're trying to get to a point, first, do we agree that we're trying to get to a point where both Bibi and Hamas are not part of this negotiating table?
That's literally what I meant. Yeah, we need two good faith sides, and we have no good faith sides.
Awesome. So if that's the prerequisite of being able to get to peace, how do we get Bibi Netanyahu out of power, and how do we get Hamas out of power?
Bibi Netanyahu, it's like you say, as soon as the war, as I said, and I think you would probably agree, as soon as the war ends, he will be removed, and hopefully will go to jail for his many and varied corruptions.
Likely, yeah.
So that will happen. But the problem then you have is that he'll just be replaced by another ultra-Zionist, because that's the way, unfortunately, this is set up.
But I'm asking, like, at a base level, the way that one could get Bibi Netanyahu out of power would be democratic at a base level. Right?
Yeah. I'm sure that I don't know the constitution, but yeah, there'll be some sort of mechanism to remove him.
Yeah. And then at a base level, the way you get rid of Hamas is what?
Ultimately, it's. I mean, this is hurts me to have to say, but it's sort of a kind of imperialist answer. Unfortunately, is that you go in there, and in the same way that, and this is the analogy that I've drawn a bit of flack for, but I think the way in which the initial stages of denazification after the Second World War happened, you go in there and you remove these people from their possibility of engagement in normal civic society. So you would go in there and remove them as the government, because, I mean, for a start, there hasn't been an election there in a long time, so you can't really even argue that they have democratic legitimacy there. And, of course, they have, committed butchery on October the 7th and at various other points. So ultimately they would need to be removed. People who have committed crimes need to go to jail, and people who have engaged in otherwise aiding and abetting these people need to have their either voting rights removed or something of that nature, so that you can then have a civic society. Part of the problem I have with the way in which Israel has responded is that the building of civic society in Gaza at the moment would be fucking impossible. They have seemingly on purpose destroyed both housing, schooling. Literally, the Parliament building of Gaza has been.
So if we could, let's just
hold on. You gotta let him finish. There'll be plenty of time to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, which means that civic society at the moment is literally impossible. So the only peaceable solution you have for the removal of Hamas, and that peaceable is the only way you're going to do it. You're not going to bomb them out of existence, other than by literally exterminating all of the people there, which isn't going to happen. So you've literally, by destroying the towns, they did a controlled demolition on the fucking university building. They never even claimed there were tunnels underneath it. It seems that there has been a systematic flattening of parts of Gaza in a way that makes it impossible.
There's a number of issues, but I just want to take this one at a time, right? So the first thing that you said there is that you believe that the only way to get them out of power, which is separate than the solution, but is a necessary prerequisite to the solution, right?
Yeah.
To get them out of power requires imperialism. What does that imperialism look like in your mind?
God, I mean, I don't think Israel would ever accept this, but some sort of UN peacekeeping force on the ground or something like that, because I don't think the Palestinian people would allow peaceably for an occupation by the IDF, and I wouldn't trust the IDF to carry it out anyway, given the crimes that they've perpetrated. So you'd need some sort of international or third party organisation to step in and essentially oversee that process, which Israel is never going to allow, because as we've seen with not allowing the UN investigators in initially, and all the rest of it, and the fact that they've killed many UN workers in the region. They don't want an open Gaza. They don't want to see the world look at what they've done to Gaza.
Let's stick on. Okay, so your answer is that you want to see a UN peacekeeping force on the ground in Gaza.
Or something of that nature, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to argue against the idea of specifically the UN, and this is the reason.
Okay.
I think that the United Nations, in order to be able to be seen as an impartial party, has to be able to be, when we're negotiating for proper, I believe in a 3-state solution, not a 2-state solution. I think Gaza and the West Bank should be independent countries, but that's a different discussion. If we're going to get to a point where there's going to be an independent Palestinian country, whether it's one or two, that is going to require some sort of party that is neither Israel nor Palestine. And I would argue that the best option that we have available to us is the UN with a large amount of influence coming from specifically Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And so because of that, I think that the UN needs to keep its hands clean. The reality of the imperialism as you're describing it is that it's going to be incredibly difficult. There are mistakes that are going to be made just inherently in it, and even to the degree that it is done as best possible, it is going to be massively unpopular. I'm sure you would grant. I'm much more comfortable allowing that to be something that is on the hands of the Israeli government. And that is part of that negotiation because it allows the United Nations to keep its hands clean. Does that make sense?
So you'd need, hang on. So you think that the Israeli government occupying Gaza during the rebuilding of the buildings they destroyed would be a solution to the situation? You think the Palestinian people would be okay with that?
I don't think it's a solution. I think that it's a necessary first step. If you're asking this question of the United Nations as occupying force or Israel as occupying force, and those are the two options that you're voicing, I would argue that Israel is occupying force, though to be clear, a horrible, though I think necessary moment in history, which we should very quickly try to move past and try to move forward through. I think is better than having the United Nations take on that role.
Well, it's fundamentally unworkable. An occupation of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces, who again, you're asking them to oversee the rebuilding of buildings they purposefully destroyed, that they needn't have destroyed, digging up the corpses of people that they bombed. Like, that's not going to be a workable solution at all.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom out for a second. There's a broad problem. I said this at the beginning, but there's a broad problem where I don't want this to be a conversation where we're just rehashing the history of Israel-Palestine, right? There are lots of ways in which Israel has messed up. There are lots of ways in which Hamas certainly has messed up, and even that the PLO has messed up, and that others within the Palestinian side of things.
But I'm not rehashing history. This campaign has happened since October. This is not like we're not going back to the Nakba or the fucking 7-Day War or any of that shit.
Okay, Kevin, your first statement of how we can move forward was that there needs to be this was your term, imperialism within Gaza, right?
On some
imperialism
level,
by definition very messy, and by definition people die under imperialism, and by definition it is an absolutely ghastly situation that I don't think either one of us are making light of.
Well, no, because that's why I asked for peacekeepers, because I'm
hold on. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin. Explain. Right, like I guess for because I'm at this point, I want clarification.
Well, when I say imperialism,
right?
I'm saying that mainly as a kind of I don't know, a reticent leftist who doesn't want to engage in imperialism on any fucking level. But given what the state that Gaza is now in, I don't see how you can do it without some sort of outside force doing something. You know, like it's literally rubble. The north, especially of Gaza, doesn't exist basically as a livable space now. So you need people to go in there and rebuild, because there's no. I mean, they don't have anything to rebuild with. It's rubble.
For clarity, just real quick.
So I want to be clear about what I was saying.
Quibbles, please. Just so I'm clear, you want an outside force. You mentioned the UN to come in to sit on it to help rebuild. In the aftermath to make sure that Hamas is removed and they can rebuild without any shenanigans going on. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Am I getting it? Okay, Quibbles.
So
Okay,
what I'm
you
arguing.
mentioned. Let me ask my question first. You mentioned that Israel would be a better idea when it comes to this than the UN would. Could you explain?
Yeah, so I'm not saying that the UN shouldn't be involved. The UN should be heavily involved. I think the UN needs to be actively involved in the rebuilding process, as does the United States, as does certainly Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and Israel, by the way. But I think that is separate than the question of what military is going to be occupying Gaza during this period of imperialism that you're describing, which I think is necessary in order to get Hamas out of power.
Well, that's
And if
what
we're
I
talking
mean.
about the military, well, if I can finish,
Yeah.
if we're talking about the military specifically, there is a massive danger, and this is true on the international stage because of the amount of attention that this is receiving. We don't want the United Nations, just more broadly, this isn't even in terms of Israel Palestine, but just more broadly, to be seen as anti-Muslim. And that is something that has been a problem historically for decades of the United Nations, and also, by the way, of it to be seen as anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli, which is a thing that is also seen on the other side. But in order for it to garner that legitimacy, it needs to have clean hands going
But
into the negotiations.
but okay, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that. But do you think that anyone will have any faith whatsoever in a rebuilding slash de-Hamasification of Gaza being done by the IDF?
No, very little.
So what?
Extraordinarily
So
little.
why are you putting that forward as a possible solution then?
Because I think that it's the least bad option. It's a horrible option, but I think it's the least bad option. I think that what we should do is this is what I argued with Wonderbox and Destiny, and both of them yelled at me. But what I
I
said
can understand why they
was,
would. Yeah, that's a,
yeah.
you're.
So what I said, well, if I could finish explaining it, what I said is I think that we need to have Area C style control over Gaza established by the IDF, and once that's done, Area C of both the West Bank and also Area C of Gaza, which is say all of Gaza, would immediately have forced elections, in spite of what Hamas would obviously want them to have. And those elections, on paper, Hamas would be barred from, but realistically, Hamas-backed candidates would likely win them anyway. Once that's done, you'd end up having an Area B-style control, right? A situation where there's civil control by the Palestinian Authority. In this case, this Palestinian Authority would be separate from the existing Palestinian Authority, and that would be one component. And then the existing Area B and Area A of the West Bank, which is
Okay,
where the
this is
majority of
all.
people in the West Bank live, would continue under Fatah control. And
Okay.
then you
This
have
is
a
this is
one-to-one.
this is
Well, if I can
madness.
complete it.
How are you going to
I
hold
just want to.
elections? They don't. There aren't
Wait.
any fucking places where people can live. What would even be the districting in a place with no buildings? Where are you going to
There are
hold an
buildings in
election?
Gaza. There are buildings in Gaza.
There are huge settlements that don't exist anymore. Where are you going to hold an election? Who the fuck lives there anymore? How are you going to do any
Kevin,
of this?
Kevin, is your claim that the 2.2 million people in Gaza, that every single home there was destroyed, that every single, like,
No,
you
no, no.
can't
I'm not.
do
I'm
an
not.
election,
I'm not.
really?
No, you can't have anything like a serious, credible election, given that significant
okay,
urban settlements have been so disrupted to the point where you couldn't even have a building with which to go and vote in.
I agree that tomorrow, obviously, we can't have an election. That's why I'm arguing for Area C style control to be established first
Okay.
as a prerequisite to having this election. Once you've gotten Area C style control, then you can have an election. But I'm arguing to have that election as quickly as possible because obviously, Area C style control within the West Bank, even, let alone in the case of Gaza, is obviously a ghastly situation to be putting the Palestinians through. And obviously, I don't support it, nor should anyone else.
This
But I'm
is.
saying that if you believe that Hamas is not capable of being part of the negotiation, and I agree with you, then we need to get to a point where there is a negotiating party on either side, which means getting rid of Bibi, which can be done democratically, and getting rid of Hamas, which unfortunately cannot be done democratically.
Yeah, I don't think Hamas can be necessarily removed democratically, but I said peaceably. I didn't say democratically. which unfortunately is, I suppose, where the imperialism comes in. But the problem, there's so much wrong, by the way, with what you're saying here. I don't even know where to begin. Firstly, getting rid of BB isn't going to be anything like a solution to the problem. He's going to be replaced with someone who's just BB light, which doesn't take us anywhere.
No, hold on, Quibbles. You got to give Kevin a little bit of time here.
Yeah,
we're going to let Kevin get interrupted for a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so
go for it.
It sort of almost doesn't matter if Bibi is removed, because the policy of the Israeli government fundamentally won't change, which is that they essentially see themselves as superior, which is why I've described them as an apartheid state, and I think they absolutely are an apartheid state. They've literally, I've got the wording of the exact law where it says, where is it? Apartheid. The citizenship law banning the naturalization of Palestine. Oh, there we go. The right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. They're essentially an ethnic supremacist government. That's what you have in Israel right now. And so you can't have a negotiation with a government which fundamentally will never accept a Palestinian state, which is currently the situation we have in Israel. So if you get rid of the talking head, which is Bibi Netanyahu, and replace him with virtually the same thing, that doesn't take you anywhere forward. Do you see what I mean?
When I say getting rid of Bibi Netanyahu is a prerequisite to peace, I'm not saying that the moment that you snap your fingers and he's gone, everything is hunky-dory. I'm saying it's a prerequisite. I'm saying it's impossible until he's gone.
Well, that is true.
I'm saying similarly that until Hamas is gone, peace is impossible, right? Yeah. And so when I say that the solution to getting rid of Bibi Netanyahu is democratic, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, once we have someone else in position of power, already it's a shared power system. But once he's truly out and in jail or whatever, that doesn't fix the problem. Yeah. But it's a prerequisite. And I'm saying Hamas gone is a prerequisite. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, the broader.
Again.
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, so if we're going to say that those are the two prerequisites, then my solution, which to be clear is not a solution to the whole problem, it's not going to fix everything. But if we're trying to get rid of Hamas, I think that the though horrible solution that I can think of, but the best one available to us is to say that IDF gets all of the massive flack, which already there's massive flack. They have no credibility, the IDF, within Palestinian circles already. And so I don't know why you're shrugging your shoulders. It's not like even the Palestinian Authority, let alone Hamas, has any credibility within Israeli circles.
But the point is, you're the reason I would throw my hands up there is because you're literally saying the solution I'm proposing has no credibility.
No, I'm saying the IDF has no credibility.
And you're suggesting they have full martial law in the initial stages?
I'm saying that is the least bad option in the interim.
It isn't an option.
Short period of time in order to get rid of Hamas, which are active terrorists.
It isn't an option. It isn't an option.
Comfortable with for 15, 30 years, obviously not.
But it isn't an option. Not just within,
no longer in control over civil matters.
Okay. Not just in terms of Palestine, but in terms of the world. The world has watched as the IDF has committed serious fucking war crimes, man. They have no credibility. The idea that any rebuilding process, any democratization of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, overseen by the IDF would have any credibility on anywhere on earth. It just wouldn't. It would be seen as the fucking farcical joke of imperialism that it clearly is.
Kevin,
the oppressor in this situation that has literally walled off Gaza for fucking 20 years now, near enough. The idea that they're going to oversee the rebuilding of the buildings they killed so that people whose relatives they've just fucking murdered are going to move back into them and hold an election. It's pie in the sky at best.
That's not what I said. I didn't say that they should be overseeing the rebuilding of these homes. I said they should be overseeing the election, that they should oversee the military matters. I'm saying immediately, as soon as that the military issue of Hamas is handled, that, and I want to be clear, that doesn't even mean destroying Hamas completely. It means getting them out of military control over the daily lives of the Gazan people. Once they're out of military control, immediately there should be an election called, and immediately civil control should be ceded to a newly established Palestinian Authority, which realistically would be ruled by candidates who were primarily backed by Hamas, unfortunately, because that's where the majority
Quibbles.
power, democratic beyond just military, exists within the
Two
Gazan people.
two
Yeah,
questions for you, Quibbles, on that, just from my understanding of what you're
yeah.
proposing here. One, how long would you guesstimate the removal of Hamas from military control would
Mhm.
take if we implemented your solution? Are we talking a year? Are we talking months? Are we talking a decade? What are we talking?
Yeah, the answer is I don't know, and the answer is that it
Okay.
takes longer if we are, unfortunately, sort of tying the hands of the Israeli government from being
The
able
second
to go
question.
through the military
Sure.
situation. Yeah.
Second question, just for clarity,
Mhm.
is again, as you said initially when you proposed this idea that a lot of the candidates would be Hamas backed during the election. What is to stop the same cycle from repeating
Yep.
and going just over and over again? How is this an actual solution?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand.
Absolutely. So the reality is that once democratic rule is established or reestablished within the Gaza Strip, that the majority of the people do support Hamas at this moment, and because of that, they will have control over civil matters, and then we will have a very clear one-to-one comparison between the areas that are currently controlled by the Palestinian Authority, which is to say Fatah, and the areas that are going to be controlled, and in both cases will be civilly controlled but not militarily controlled, by what is technically not Hamas but is realistically Hamas. And that one-to-one comparison, I think, will very quickly, particularly with the help of the Jordanians, and particularly with the help of Saudi Arabia in particular, which is going into October 7th, arguably the reason that Iran wanted October 7th to happen in the first place, and why they started pressured Hamas into doing it, was because they were concerned about increasing the strong
Okay.
relations between Saudi
Can I
Arabia
just?
and Israel. And so, well, if I could finish it. And
Yeah.
so, when Saudi Arabia is able to give money and aid of other forms to the Area B, existing Area B, which is to say within the West Bank, under the control of Fatah, those people, those Palestinians, are going to see a marked improvement in their quality of life. And when you have another election 4 or 10 years down the line, my hope would be that seeing that differential, that Fatah will increase in its support within the rest of the Gaza Strip and the rest of the West Bank.
Can I just this? I don't even know where to start. Pie in the Sky barely covers the weird nonsense of this situation, but I do just have to push back on one point at least. The idea that you have just espoused, which I think is there's no evidence for whatsoever, that there's did you say majority or vast majority, whatever, of the Gazan people support Hamas? I don't know that there's any evidence for that whatsoever. You act as if it would be guaranteed that their candidates would win in an election. Again, I don't see any evidence for that whatsoever. They barely have food there, let alone polling organisations. So I don't know how you can possibly know
I
that.
would be, yeah, I would be very happy if they didn't, but I'd be very surprised if they didn't.
Well, fundamentally,
If they
therefore, I
didn't,
think
then what I'm
you
suggesting
should
or
fundamentally oppose the actions of the Israeli government, because if anything's
no, but
likely
Kevin,
to
Kevin,
radicalize the people of Gaza, it would be bombing their cities flat.
okay. If Hamas didn't win the election, then what I'm arguing for would be a better argument,
The election,
because what I'm arguing for would be much faster, because once there was an election and once there was Area B style civil control under this newly established Palestinian Authority, then it would very quickly be able to get increasing legitimacy, and it would be able
Okay.
to maintain
this is
itself
the thing
independently.
you're arguing for isn't going to happen. This is nonsense. So it doesn't
Right,
matter.
Kevin,
It
Kevin,
doesn't matter whether
Hold
you
on.
think Hamas have majority
the
support or not.
answer.
The thing you're
Okay, the
arguing
statement.
for is
The thing. Okay,
gibberish.
hold on.
Hold on, both of you, please.
Can I address?
We are circling the drain on this a little bit.
Can
I do
I'm happy
want
to move forward. Can I just address the "it won't happen" point?
concisely, and then I have another question.
Yeah, the statement "it won't happen" when we're talking about what ought to happen isn't useful. You're saying that, like, politically it's not like, okay, maybe it isn't likely, but
Yeah.
that's not an answer to the question of what we ought to do. It's a question of what will happen. If you're asking what will happen, it's going to be very different than what I think ought to happen. But I'm arguing what ought to
Okay,
happen.
okay. What I
Right?
think ought to happen is that the IDF need to get the fuck out of occupied territory. You need to remove all of the
Okay,
settlements from the West Bank. these things need to fucking happen. But again, is that going to happen? No. So it's not useful to just fucking say it as if it's just going to happen overnight. That's what I mean.
That is exactly what Israel over a decade and a half, close to 2 decades ago, did in the Gaza Strip, and the result we see currently.
And
right?
they've
The
built.
result
Hang on,
is
are you going to
not-
ignore the wall and the functional blockade and the fact that it's been an open air prison ever since? Because that bit seems like quite an important part of the story. That you can't just act like they just moved out and we allowed them to live peaceably and free. It's shite. You're just talking rubbish.
You just argued for a cleansing of all of the Jews living in the West Bank, which happened in Gaza.
No, not cleansing. A returning of the homes that were stolen from people. That's what I'm asking for.
Wait, I'm sorry. So you're not saying all of them. You're saying the ones that
I'm sure. I would be perfectly happy with Jewish people
Kevin,
living in a free Palestinian society.
Hold on. Yeah,
That's
let Kevin
fine.
go.
Okay,
Kevin, go ahead.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not the one who's. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you are an absolute Zionist or whatever. But there are lots of people who are essentially Jewish supremacists in this, and I'm sure there are Arab supremacists as well. And all of those people can fuck right off. I'm not arguing that people can't live in any X, Y, or Z area. But what I'm saying is the Israeli government and settlers that they have enabled and emboldened and literally armed in recent times have.
You mean members of the outposts. That's a different thing. An outpost isn't the same as a settlement.
Okay.
If you're talking about stolen, hold up. If you're talking about stolen housing, you're talking about outposts.
Okay, outposts then. The people in outposts need to be fucking removed.
Let me finish. Those are not just illegal according to the UN. Those are illegal according to Israel. If you're talking about the outposts, right?
And what are Israel doing to stop that?
And they have taken out many of them. There have been very recent ones. There was one in like 2019 that they took out, right? But if you're talking about the overwhelming majority of Jews who are living in the West Bank, they don't live in outposts. They live in settlements, which are not the same. Settlements are rightly purchased land. They're not the same.
When you say rightly purchased, who are they rightly purchased from, and under what legal framework? But under what legal framework? Are they working from within under the Israeli framework? So under the state, which literally says that they have the right to govern all of this fucking area, that don't allow it literally says the determination of solely of the Jewish people. Okay. They will not allow a free Palestinian government to enforce its laws in the area, which would undoubtedly have protected that land from being sold to people who want to continue the further expansion of Zionism in that area.
That's not true. That's
okay,
not true.
just a little housekeeping here. I understand you disagree with the point, and you can absolutely, and I encourage you to make clear your disagreement, but you got to let him finish his point before you do that so we can actually understand what he's saying, because it's hard to hear when you're both shouting over each other. I just can't.
You're right.
Okay?
I understood what he was saying, but for the audience, you should say it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard. So just let him speak, please.
Yeah.
And then you can rebut, and I will make sure that he doesn't interrupt you until, and we can go back and forth, but we need to do that or else it's going to get.
Yeah.
I sometimes forget that there's an audience, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
The land was bought under an Israeli legal framework from land that would have been and should have been inside the boundary and therefore legal remit of a independent Palestinian state, which undoubtedly would have protected against the encroachment of Zionist forces in their region because they have very little land to begin with. The piecemeal ethnic cleansing by I've just bought it, it's mine, bro, fuck you, is no real better. It's just a longer term, bit by bit genocide. That's what's happening there. Okay, I don't give a fuck that you've got a piece of paper that says, look, I bought it fair and square. That's not how it should work, and not how it probably would have worked had there been a Palestinian state. You can't buy somebody else's land under laws that you have put in, specifically in an ethnic supremacist way.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. The first thing is that when we're talking about settlements, which are, I want to be clear, different than outposts, we're talking about settlements. Number one, 90% of the population, the Jewish population living in the West Bank, is within a mile of the border. 90%, right? Number one. And then number two, they represent less than 1% of the landmass of the totality of the West Bank. right? All of the settlements represent less than 1% of the land mass. So when we talk about that, it is true that it is likely that some portion of those populations are going to, when eventually the West Bank is able to become an independent country, and Israel is able to be independent of it. When that happens, it is likely that certain settlements are going to be folded into Israel proper, and that there will also be land swaps, and that other components that are currently in Israel will be given to the West Bank, will be given to the independent country of Palestine. And it is likely that as a component of that, there is also going to be a massive, in the billions, perhaps in the trillions, amount of money that is handed over to the Palestinians from the Israelis and from the international community more generally.
I would love to see that happen. I think that's a very rose tinted view of how that would go.
Okay,
also, we would need to see the specific details of the fact that they're. You're saying folding settlements into land, and you'd have a land swap. Are they going to give them useful land or fucking desert? Like that sort of thing.
It's going to be it's going to be a negotiation, and it's going to be a difficult negotiation.
And it's not going to be a negotiation of equals, because one of them has nuclear weaponry, one of them has an army that they have literally shown will go in and fucking destroy buildings and destroy entire fucking towns if they want to. That's, you know what I mean? It's not an equal. It's not a meeting of equals. There is it. Do you think they're going to get a fair deal out of that situation? And also, this is to a degree pie in the sky, because we're dealing with ultra-Zionists who don't want that to ever happen. They will never, ever accept a two-state solution.
Okay. I agree that there are ultra-Zionists. I agree that there is Hamas. But keep bringing up over and over and over, oh, Hamas exists, it can't happen. Oh, the ultra-Zionists exist, it can't happen, isn't useful when we're trying to have a discussion about what could happen, presuming that first Bibi and Hamas are out of power, right? So if I'm saying something like these are land swaps that are conceptually possible, obviously I'm not saying that that's something that's going to happen under Bibi Netanyahu. I'm saying that there's something that's conceptually possible, right? It's a different state.
I do want to kind of ground this a little bit, because you're right. This is something in the far future that may or may not happen. I want to get to something that's happening now. Okay. Recently, there's been calls, since this has started, there's been calls for ceasefire. And I'm just curious to ask both of you, when you call, if you are calling for a ceasefire, and I'm not saying you are, if you are, what does that mean to you? What does that look like? And if you aren't, why not? That would be my question. And I guess we started with Kevin last time. We'll start with Quibbles this time, and then we'll see what. So, ceasefire, yes or no?
Ceasefire, yes or no? There's sort of two questions built into that. One of them is, do I support the people who are currently calling for it? And the other is, do I conceptually support the idea of a ceasefire? Conceptually, do I support the idea of a ceasefire? Yes. But as prerequisites to a ceasefire, you'd have to, for example, give back all of the still held captive people that Hamas is holding. So if Hamas was willing to do that, and if Hamas was willing to give up their attacks on Israel, then yes, I would conceptually be in support of a ceasefire. But I think that often it is used as a form of sloganeering in order to imply that Israel shouldn't have any sort of response to what happened on October 7th and shouldn't try to actually genuinely fix the problem of Hamas. And I think failing to fix the problem of Hamas, yes, is a problem for Israelis, but is ultimately a larger problem for the Gazan people.
Have the Israeli government has the Israeli government not had enough of a response yet? Really? No,
you said that in order to. Should I answer that, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, go for it. I'll say my piece after. Yeah.
You said that you believe that the only way to get Hamas out of power is through some form of imperialism. We are not at a position where Hamas is out of power. And so therefore, I think that we need to get Hamas out of power if we get to...
Right, but I don't think it seems though Israeli imperialism is how we got to this situation in the first place. I don't see that more Israeli imperialism is going to solve the problem. But regardless of that, let me just get on to the ceasefire point. I do support a ceasefire. I think a ceasefire without preconditions is the only realistic... at least a cessation whilst negotiations take place. A kind of, a ceasefire, basically.
Okay, just for my clarity, when you say without preconditions, are you saying just straight across the board, Israel and Hamas both stop? Just No
Yeah,
conditions
yeah,
or
just
anything?
yeah,
What is-
just ceasefire. I presume at first would be a time one, so you'd say, look, I mean, Kamala Harris said 6 weeks, whatever, and then during those 6 weeks, you negotiate exactly how everything goes down. I agree that all of the hostages need to be returned on both sides, and that's, I think, a point that gets missed in all of this. Hamas do have innocent people that they have frankly mistreated appallingly, it would appear. And those people need to be returned, and some recompense needs to be made to them, frankly, by the world. Anyway, but Israel has held a lot of very innocent people as well. I'm not arguing about the Hamas terrorists that they hold as prisoners. That's fine. Seems a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But they have innocent people, including children, that they have held hostage for a very long time. It's been a consistent practice that they have engaged in, which the world has basically ignored. For instance, when we talk about hostage exchanges, it's not actually for terrorists by and large, it's for innocent Palestinians. So you're exchanging innocence for innocence, and on both sides, evil people are prospering at the exchange of innocent people. So I do support a ceasefire. And yeah, there would be no preconditions in the initial, and you'd negotiate in good faith. Again, I don't realistically see either side negotiating in good faith, which you call me doomer pilled if you will, but yeah, that's the way you get around this in the end.
I guess my frustration is I don't quite know what the I don't want to say what the point is, but like how what if it is your belief that neither side is capable or willing to negotiate, like where are you going from there?
I was going to make a very dark joke. Anyway, no,
I mean, like it's fine. You can make the if that's actually your answer.
No. I was going to be facetious. It doesn't matter. I was going to say I'll go to a clinic in Switzerland, but that's anyway. No,
I'll talk about dark jokes. Fair
yeah,
enough.
exactly. There you go.
Canada,
Yeah, you see what I mean?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, because it's all very doomery, right? I don't think both sides. This is the distinction I would make. I don't think it's both sides in the sense that the people of both Gaza and Israel, I don't think want to see a continuation of this shit. It's the evil pricks who are currently in control of both of those places that are the problem and need to be dealt with robustly, frankly, by the world, world governments, including Joe Biden and my own government, who have aided and abetted one side against the other. So that, yeah, I don't think it's not that both sides. It's not that they can't be governed. They can't have representatives who can get around a table and talk properly and actually hash this problem out. But unfortunately, the stranglehold that these ultra-Zionist fucking assholes in Tel Aviv have is very, very strong, and they're not going to release that.
That's not an answer. Like, therefore what?
Therefore what? A continuation of bloodshed. Unfortunately, I don't see a positive solution to this in the near future.
Quibbles, is that me or is that you?
Okay.
No, he's roboting for me as well. So
okay,
okay.
Yeah.
You were better for a second there. I think you're good now. Try again.
Okay. It's not useful, even if it is always correct and never useful to say I don't know, and it is often correct and never useful to say doom or pill.
Right.
Right. And so, like, neither I don't know or doom or pill, like, you're not wrong. Yeah, it's a horrible situation. I agree with you. It's a horrible situation. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it's not useful when you're just like, if you were combating my argument for this Area C to immediate Area B style system, and you were saying, here's this other solution that I would like to try, that this might be a better option, I'd be like, awesome, let's try to talk about what that is. But just simply having you be like, no, that's a bad answer, and not giving some other alternative, like, it's very difficult to argue for anything in the situation as difficult as this one. But it's near impossible to argue for something against nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, if I may.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
If I may. Because Kevin, as I understood it, did make an argument he is for a ceasefire, right?
Yeah.
He's for a cessation of hostilities. He doesn't think it's likely,
Right.
but he wants it to happen.
Yeah.
But
Is
that's
that
actually more
correct? Hold on, just real quick.
yeah.
Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's given you something. That's a
But
solution.
it's not a piece of justice, right? I think both of us understand the weight of piece of justice as being whether it's 2 or 1 states, Palestine having an independent country slash countries, and Israel having an independent country slash countries, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
so if
I mean
that's the goal, you're
that
not actually moving the ball forward towards that. You're just getting us back to October 6th, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess, but like that would be a better situation. You talk about what's just.
But it's not.
It's if
It's
the
not a better
continuation of the current situation is far less just. We are seeing unspeakable
Wait, hold on.
horrors take place here, and I'm not. I know
Okay.
this is. I don't want to be just like too emotional about it, or whatever. But you can't mention words like justice and then argue in favor of the IDF having martial law over a place it's fucking wrecked. That's not fucking
I'm not
justice.
arguing. I'm not arguing in favor of that at all. I'm arguing that that is a prerequisite. That's very different than arguing in favor of it.
Okay, arguing that that would be in any way or any way a moving the ball forward. It's not. That's just a continuation of Israel doing what it's already fucking doing.
If I were
It's madness to
okay,
think that that would
we're
even
talking about
remotely work.
Kevin, we're
Yeah.
talking about terrorists, right? We're talking about terrorists who have
Yeah, we're talking
stolen
about Bibi
literally.
Netanyahu. Yes, yeah.
We're talking about terrorists who have stolen literally in excess of $11 billion from the Gazan people, Hamas. We're talking about people who don't even live in the same place. The same. I want to be able to call it a country, but I can't even call it a country realistically. Of Gaza. And they're just like living their dreams out in Qatar, and these guys are stealing everyone dry.
Okay, but I mean that's
And
not an argument for like, and I know you're not necessarily making this argument, but you're roboting again. Sorry.
Oh yeah, Quibbles. You. Uh oh. Is that again? Is that me
is
or is
my
that him?
thing fucked again?
That's him because me and you can talk like so there's a connection problem at his end.
Okay.
go on my
I just
phone.
want to
I'm
make
gonna
sure.
go on my
But
Yeah.
in the meantime, while he gets that fixed,
Yeah.
Kevin, give us so I guess to kind of frame this discussion a little bit, right? I understand. I don't even know if he can hear us yet. Quibbles, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Quibbles. I guess where I'm coming from here is I understand.
Nope.
Hold on.
Okay. We've had a drop.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties, gang. We'll get it done. Okay. Hello, can you say something? I don't know if I can hear you.
Yeah. Words. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I understand that this is a place you eventually want to get to, right? You've laid it out, but I want to talk specifically about the now, right? 30,000 dead.
Yeah.
Is the number, something like that. You're saying a ceasefire is not something you'd be in favor of unless it made unless hostages released and all these other conditions.
I think that
Kevin is let me finish.
Yeah, go
Kevin
ahead.
is saying that he wants the hostilities to stop now, and then we can figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So why is he wrong? Why is Kevin wrong?
I think he's wrong because what he's doing is he's getting us back to October 6th. What he's doing is he's making this so it's a situation where Hamas is going to continue to have control over the over Gaza Strip, where they're going to continue to be funded by Iran, where they're going to be, as is Hezbollah, as is the Houthis, continue to be getting more and more funding. The technology is only getting better and better and better. The ability for the Iron Dome to stop these weapons from coming in and from attacking civilians within Israel is only getting worse comparatively over time. And you look at the cost of its use every single time, that's not going down proportionately. And you look at the quality of life of the people within the Gaza Strip beyond just in Tel Aviv, which is also horrible, but particularly in the case of the Gaza Strip, it is simply untenable. I think that at a base level, we have to understand that October 6th was no picnic for either the Palestinians or for the Israelis. And if we're trying to get to figuring out a situation of actually getting to this justice, like justice doesn't mean back to the 6th. Justice means trying to move forward and trying to figure out a path out of all of this, and that path out requires getting rid of Hamas.
Yeah, but
Kevin.
the problem you're going to have, I think, is that let's look at it a different way. Getting back to the 6th in the short term is better than what we currently have. What we currently have is tens of thousands of people dead. What we have is people starving to death. The idea of fucking shooting at flour trucks and all sorts of unbelievable, unspeakable evils. When you posit pie in the sky notions of the IDF, the lovely IDF overseeing the democratic transformation of the Gaza Strip, but yet you then poo-poo the idea that actually maybe we could stop the fucking killing now and get back to the 6th, and then from that point try and build anything better than the fucking hell that we've experienced for the last 3-4 months. It blows my mind. There's an undercurrent of not dishonesty. I don't want to be rude there, but the disingenuousness to the argumentation here, because I get that you don't want to defend the actions of the IDF, but in essence, what you're planning here is just allowing the IDF the scope to continue doing what they're doing. So you're essentially arguing for a not blank check, but a continuation of what the IDF has been doing, which frankly is fucking genocide, which is a point we may get onto in a second. By extra steps, you're essentially dancing around the issue, which is, like I say, a little bit disingenuous.
Okay. So I just want to read some times if it's possible that we've already tried a ceasefire. June 2008.
Who is we, by the way?
I apologize. We, as in between Hamas and Israel.
Right.
So in 2008, June of 2008, Egypt brokered a 6-month ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. In January 2009, there was another ceasefire. In November of 2012, there was ceasefire.
I thought you didn't want to relitigate the history. What's happening now?
I'm just pointing. I just want to point out this component of this, and then we can understand this broader point, which is
let Quibbles make his point.
There was another one in August 2014. There was another one in May of 2021, and yet still October 7th happened. So it's been well in excess of a decade and a half, and these ceasefires have been tried many times before. And these ceasefires clearly have not stopped October 7th from happening, and clearly have not fixed problems that are dealt with on a daily basis by the Palestinian people living under the control of the terrorist dictatorship of Hamas. So
that's interesting.
I'm not
framing.
Comfortable.
That's interesting.
I'm not comfortable just.
Well, hold on. Let Quibbles finish, and then.
Yeah. So I'm not comfortable having another October 7th and having another of these horrible flare-ups that resume after October 7th in another year and a half. I want this to be the last one. I don't want this to happen again. And you're saying that there are 30,000 people dead already, and you're right, and that's horrible. But if the question is, do we want there to be 50,000 or even 100,000 dead now, or do we want there to be 30,000 dead today and another 30,000 dead in 2 years and another 30,000 dead in 2 years after that and another 60,000 a year after that, and so on and so forth for the next 100 years? I think quite clearly that even if it's worse in the short term, that the better choice long term is to get rid of the undergirding problem, and the undergirding problem is Hamas.
No, the undergirding problem, Hamas are a problem, undoubtedly. But the undergirding problem, the core part of all of this problem is the cancer of Zionism, is fundamentally the problem. Now,
I don't know what
don't misunderstand.
Zionism, for my audiences, because a lot of people say Zionism and they mean a lot of different things.
Yes.
So when you say Zionism, what do you mean?
I mean the ethno-nationalist Jewish supremacist movement, which seeks, depending on exactly the interpretation, either the current borders of Israel or what's called Greater Israel, which involves parts of Egypt and Jordan and all sorts, or you can go to the very, very silly biblical extent that some theocratic Christians do, which is from the Nile to the Euphrates for some biblical fucking reason. Regardless of the exact geographic intent, it's essentially an ethno-state where basically only Jewish or mostly, like 90% plus Jewish people can live, which is ultimately the goal of these ultra-Zionist people. Now, do not conflate Zionism with Jewish people, because there are two groups of people who do that. Neo-Nazis, who want to smear all Jewish people with blood libel, and ultra-Zionists, who want to drag all Jewish people into complicity with the crimes that they wish to commit against the Palestinian people. These are two cheeks of the same backside, and hopefully they're both spanked out of existence, or at least out of political power at some point in the near future. Regardless, that's what I mean by Zionism. It's an ethno-nationalist, imperialist, colonialist endeavor.
Sure, let him finish his point though, Quibbles. I know you're rearing at the bit here, but
so that's
he
the
was getting to his
so
point.
that's the point.
Right.
It's the ultra Zionism that I fucking despise about all of this, because, for instance, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu has given
hold on.
initially
I
tacit
get
support to the existence of Hamas because it would take power away from the PLO.
Okay, when you're talking about the Ultra Zionist project, there is certainly a large portion. It is not a majority, but it is a large, noticeable, and very real minority of people within Israel proper who would like to see all of the West Bank be a component of Israel proper. That is true. It is not true that there is even a sizable minority of people within Israel proper who want Gaza to be part of Israel proper. That's not true, right? That hasn't been true for decades. And so it's frustrating.
There were people trying to rush in and do settlements, literally, as literally following the IDF into these now destroyed places, attempting to seize land in Gaza right now. That's a thing that's happened during the whole process, yeah? So, like,
it is a thing that is
whether there's, I don't know the exact proportions.
You just want on a scale. But if you're talking about the views of Bibi Netanyahu, even himself, let alone of the broader right wing of the Israeli people and of their politique, it's not true that is a broadly supported view or broadly supported movement in the way that it is for West Bank. So in the context of Gaza specifically, the reason for the Gaza specific problem is the issues of Hamas. It is a different situation than West Bank. And I don't think that the West Bank and Gaza should be conflated in this situation. If you want to talk about Zionism and you're talking about West Bank, I think that is valid. It is certainly a component of the problem. It's obviously not the whole problem, but it is a component of the problem. It is not the same in the context of the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I can't speak to the exact proportions of Israeli society. I don't have the polling on this, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a massive proportion of it right now. All you need is a relatively small number of people to begin the settlement process, and the same encroachment that we have seen in the West Bank can continue in the Gaza Strip.
It's against Israeli law. It has been against Israeli law for over a decade and
there
a
are
half.
lots of things that are against Israeli law that the Israeli government are happy to turn a blind eye to. Come on.
No, that's not true. There are, other than the Jews who were literally stolen from, who were kidnapped, there are otherwise literally zero Jews that were in Gaza prior to October 7th. Now there are the Jews who were kidnapped, and there are the Jews who are part of the IDF. And those are the only Jews in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I mean, yeah, okay. Fine.
Okay, so it's not the same as the West Bank.
I didn't say it was exactly the same. I don't particularly. It doesn't matter to me all that much the tactics that they're using, with whether it's direct ethnic displacement via bombing places and driving them into an area where you say this is a safe area, and then you continue to fucking bomb them, or whether you do piecemeal buying up of land under obviously unfair circumstances.
Okay. The point that I'm making is that I don't want to see a conflation made between what's happening in the West Bank and what's happening in Gaza. If we're talking specifically about what's going on in Gaza, you can't blame the Gaza situation on the Zionist project of settlements within the West Bank.
I'm not.
Part of the issue. in the West
I'm
Bank.
saying
But it's
the
not
overall.
the what's going on.
I'm saying
That's
the
not true.
overall,
on.
the overall imperialist endeavor, which is Zionism, seeks control over all of that land. They want it,
But that's not
the
true.
very
They don't
least,
see it.
all of what we now know as either Palestine slash Israel or
But that's
Israel
no,
Palestine.
I'm telling you, that's literally not true.
It
There
literally
a
is true
large
to
proportion.
for some of them anyway. I don't know the specific percentages, and it
okay,
doesn't really matter because
okay,
again,
you're
they
right.
don't necessarily
But
need it to. Zionism as a project in general was very very unpopular in worldwide Jewish sentiment up until obviously the Second World War, right? So you don't necessarily need a massive percentage of a thing in order to drive that wedge home bit by bit by bit. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Now we've seen a massive explosion in the rate of that in the Gaza Strip in recent times because they've seized an opportunity, right? In the same way that George Bush seized an opportunity with 9/11 to go and do his fucking Iraq endeavours, right? It's a disaster-tunity for Zionists to go in and fucking continue their ethnic displacement and genocide of Palestinian people. And that's unfortunately what's happening. And then the Palestinian people are asked to sit around a table and negotiate with the people that are fucking murdering them. It's madness.
I'm sure I could find an example if I were to look at American, body politic. I'm sure I could find an example of people who believe that we should annex Canada or that we should, invade Mexico, right? But that is not something that is a broad problem, a broad view of either major party.
Okay,
Right?
but is the U.S.
Hold on,
Army currently in Mexico?
I want to finish my point. If we're talking about the broad issues of the Republican Party in the United States, that is something that is reasonable to talk about. And it has to be categorized as this is something that many Republicans believe. They believe the last election was stolen. Lots of Republicans think that, right? It is not true that lots of Republicans think that we should annex Canada, right? It is true that lots of, not the majority, but lots of Israelis think that West Bank should be part of Israel proper. It is not true that a sizable proportion of Israelis believe that Gaza should be annexed. That's not true. So don't conflate those.
Your analogy would work, but for the fact that currently the US government and its armed forces is not flattening Mexico City. That would be a fair analogy in that situation, but unfortunately it's not. Whether a significant portion of the Israeli population believe X, Y, Z is rather irrelevant to the point that they are currently occupying and bombing the fuck out of the Gaza Strip. So whether that has massive widespread support amongst the Israeli people, clearly the Israeli government don't give a fuck about the thoughts of the Israeli people, given that there have been literally riots to try and get rid of fucking Netanyahu, and the cunt's still there.
Okay, Kevin, during the Afghanistan war,
the
United States-Afghanistan war, do you think it would have been appropriate for someone to say that America was going to make Afghanistan a state?
No.
Of course not.
Yeah.
You can say lots of stuff about what America was doing in Afghanistan, and a lot of it is appropriate. A lot of it is reasonable to say about what we were doing in Afghanistan. One of the things that you can't say is that anyone in America wanted to make Afghanistan a state. Again, I'm sure you can find random crazies on Twitter who were saying that shit. But it is not something that any sitting senators, it is not something that the broader American politic was encouraging for Afghanistan to become a state. It is not true that Gaza is something that Israel wants to be part of its country. True.
Wick, you may remember this. Do you remember on the Hippy Dippy when I think it was critically thinking veteran literally proposed that they make Afghanistan a state?
Yes, but I don't think
no, I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing that that's a point.
A Twitter person.
No, I know. I was just reminiscing for a second. I wasn't making the serious argument that people actually want that to happen. Yeah. Anyway, but the again, it's not really a reasonable analogy or whatever. And also, Afghanistan was also a fucking nightmare. So I suppose in one respect it is actually.
I agree. That's
apt.
why I took it. That's why I used it as an example. That's my whole point.
Okay, hold on. I think we're getting down a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. I don't think it captures, I think, the essence of what Kevin is
Don't
trying
mention,
to argue
don't
here.
mention rabbit tunnels. Fucking hell, the IDF will bomb me. Come on now, let's be silly.
Oh, my bad. Fair enough. Okay. Rabbit synagogues. Okay. We're gonna
Yeah,
have
rabbi. Rabbi is the plural of rabbit.
rabbis.
Yeah.
Okay. So what Kevin is alluding to when we talk about the underlying problems when it comes to the situation in Israel and Palestine as a whole, he is arguing that the reason that this is all happening, the main causal factor, is Zionism uh, as a movement, as a mind state. So regardless of the individual policies within Zionism, is that, as he outlined earlier, that ideology of Zionism is the one that is leading to all of this death and bloodshed. That is the major cause, not the only. I don't think he's arguing, but the major. Is that correct, Kevin?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can go back.
Okay.
We can go back to the very
Sure.
foundation of Israel. Never since, long before Hamas were ever a thing, there was bloodshed taking place, and
before we do
Zionism
that,
was the
before we
spark
do that,
for
just
all of that.
just to again to ground this. So what would be your response to that when we talk about the
Yeah.
underlying problems with Israel Palestine, the base foundational issues? Do you agree or disagree that Zionism is the pillar upon which it rests? And if not, if you disagree, what do you
Sure.
think is?
I think the base problem is that there is one Jerusalem, and that there is a very long history of Jews first being ethnically cleansed out of what is modern day Israel and modern day Judea and Samaria or West Bank. And then there is a long history of Palestinians being oppressed in the same context. There's a long history of imperialism by the British. There's a long history of, go down the list.
No, we didn't do nothing
there-
wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. We're blameless in all of this. How dare you?
Certainly, America did nothing wrong ever. America's done nothing wrong.
True.
And and so rightly, when people are growing up as Israelis or as Palestinians and as Jews or Muslims more generally, the stories that we tell ourselves, and those stories aren't untrue, they're just slanted. They're just stories that are focusing on our own strife rather than the strife of the people who are also being harmed. Those are stories that are seemingly in contradiction. And I think that that is something that can't be fixed by simply, screaming about how horrible Hamas is or screaming about how horrible, Bibi Netanyahu is, even though those things are perhaps true in certain contexts. But I think that the ultimate way to get forward is to actually try very hard, even though it's difficult, to find the places where people on the other side are acting in good faith. And the way to do that is to try to figure out ways of really, putting forward policies that, even though they're difficult and even though they're not going to be perfect, are going to move the ball forward, even if only in a small way, rather than just trying to accept the status quo. Because I think at a base level, the status quo as it exists is unacceptable for both Jews and for Muslims and for Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, you speak
We solved it.
in nice platitudes, and I appreciate, and I don't want to just.
But that's not quite a platitude.
It is in the sense that, again, your solution or your step in the right direction, you're moving the ball forward, I think was the phrase you used. It would just, make the situation intensely worse. That's not a good situation. But are we going to get onto apartheid and genocide at any point? Because I've got quotes.
I just wanted
I did research,
to-
motherfucker.
I know. I just wanted to kind of put a pin in that. Look, we got 45 minutes. It's plenty of time to get to
Okay.
both of these topics.
Fair enough.
I promise you. Okay. Well, let's just get right into it then.
Let's go.
Genocide. Is that what is going on in Gaza right now? Is Israel engaging in active, intentional genocide?
Yes.
I'm going to pass the ball
Next
to
question.
Kevin first. And, well, do you even disagree with that, Quibbles?
That is a genocide? Yeah, I do.
Okay, can you elaborate? First, I guess, Kevin, can you explain why you think it is? And then we'll allow Quibbles to explain why he thinks it is not.
Yeah, I mean, again, without getting into nitpicking definitions and all the rest of it, I think under any realistic definition of the components of genocide, what we are seeing in Gaza and what we have seen over the course of decades by successive Israeli governments has been, and indeed on the West Bank, is genocide. Okay, we have seen a consistent ethnic displacement. We have seen direct murders. We have seen any number of awful things. Whether you think they're in regard to rockets coming over or October the 7th or anything else, what we are seeing is the bit by bit forcible removal of one ethnic group from the place. We have seen also the beginnings of genocide, as well as the actual actions itself. We have seen the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, along with their murder and destruction of the area. We have seen, I mean, unspeakably genocidal quotes, not from random fucking people, not from even random members of political parties, but from leading government figures. And I've got a couple of quotes, if you'll allow me, indulge me for a second. Benjamin Netanyahu directly referred to Amalek in a tweet he sent out, in which he said, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says our holy Bible, and we do remember, which is a direct reference to the Bible, in which God asks Saul to punish the Amaleks for what they have done to Israel. Do not spare them, or all that belongs to them, do not spare them. Put them to death, the men, the women, the children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Pretty fucking genocidal. He's the head of government. The Israeli public diplomacy minister, Galit Distel Atbaryan, lovely name, erase all of Gaza from the face of the earth, that the Gazan monsters will fly to the southern fence and try to enter Egyptian territory, or they will die. Gaza should be erased. Knesset member Hanok Milbitsky said, "You will die, your children will die, your grandchildren will die. There won't be a Palestinian state. That will never be." May Golan, Israel Minister of Social Equality, delightfully.
Kevin, I don't know how many of these.
Just one last one.
Let him finish. We got there's just two of you.
Okay.
You guys can have both a good amount of chunk of time to introduce your point.
May Golan.
It's just quotes from random dates, but okay.
Well, no. Well, they're not random people, are they? Benjamin Netanyahu is not a random individual in all of this. May Golan, the Israeli Minister of Social Equality, ironically, said, "I am proud of the ruins of Gaza. I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care. For all I care, they can go and just jump into the sea." We have seen consistent genocidal action and word, deed and spoken from leaders of the Israeli government, from the IDF, and that goes along with the fact that they have been directly killing people, not just what's the phrase they use, collateral damage. We have seen literally there's the infamous guy with the white flag who is then murdered by an Israeli sniper. We have seen recently the Flower Massacre, which is just an unspeakable crime, which Israel has tried to put down to being a crush, which is interesting given the bullet wounds in the victims. This is a deliberate campaign of ethnic cleansing, murder, and ultimately displacement, which continues on from the Nakba and on for the decades. This has been a long-term project. It has not been, thankfully, a conclusive project. So the idea that it has to be a complete genocide and that all of them have to be removed is clearly absurd. I think under any definition of genocide, this meets it. And if it doesn't, then genocide is a worthless phrase.
Okay. That said, I want to give Quibbles equal time here to explain why it's not a genocide.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. The first I just want to start with, beyond the question of whether or not something is a genocide, there's a tactical uh, thing that's going on here, I think, which is that it is obviously difficult to be seen as the person who is saying something is not a genocide, because it seems to imply that you are somehow in support of what's going on, or that you're somehow diminishing it. And I want to be clear about why I care about the term genocide and making sure that it's being used properly. I think that the term genocide uh, is sometimes used more flippantly than it ought to. And the result of that is that when we are trying to discuss things like ethnic cleansing, when we are trying to discuss things like genocide, when we're trying to discuss things that are war crimes and beyond that, just ethical breaches at the highest level, we need those terms to mean something. And there's a reason that, sexual assault is different than rape. There's a reason that all of these terms have different terms. And it doesn't mean that you're a rape apologist when you call something that's sexual assault rather than rape. With that said, I want to now unpack the question of whether or not something is genocide. So what I heard you list was ethnic displacement, bit by bit forcible removal of one ethnic group from the place, dehumanization of the Palestinian people, the murder and destruction of the area, and I'll broadly describe your quotes as stochastic terrorism. The stochastic terrorism, I'm fully in agreement with you. Absolutely, there have been members of the Knesset, certainly Bibi is one of them, who have been engaged in stochastic terrorism. Yes, that is absolutely true. The murder and destruction of the area. When we talk about murder, it definitionally, built into the term, means something about intent. And I think that it's unfair in the context of a war to say that the unintentional killings of civilians when you're going after terrorists can be counted as murder. It can certainly be called an unjustified killing. That's definitely true. But I'm not comfortable with the term murder. These are, again, and I see your face and I understand why you're giving it, but there is a difference between an unjustified killing and a murder. And it does matter when we're trying to describe that difference. And the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, absolutely. The ethnic displacement, I don't agree with that one. If we're talking about what happened during the Nakba, absolutely that was an ethnic displacement, yes. But if we're talking about what's happening currently, no, that's not an ethnic displacement. The most recent ethnic displacement in the context of the Israel-Palestine situation was the ethnic displacement of the Jews who were living in Gaza. I was in support of that ethnic displacement. That is, and the reason that I bring that up is because ethnic displacement is obviously horrible, but there are situations where ethnic displacement can be appropriate. That was one of them. It is very rare when it's appropriate. I don't think that it's appropriate to try to get the people out of Gaza permanently. Obviously, it's not appropriate. It's also not happening. That's not anything that anyone is genuinely trying to push for. If we're talking about the West Bank, I think that it is unfortunately likely that a large number of Jews ultimately are going to be ethnically displaced from the West Bank in order to see the West Bank become an independent country, because I don't see that being an independent country that is comfortable having Jews, even as a minority. Whereas there is obviously a large, sizable minority, a minority that has been in the Supreme Court. It's represented 20% of people within Israel proper of Palestinians. So I do see a difference there. But with that, we can open up.
Lots been said.
It's a very interesting head of a pin you've decided to dance on there. The unlawful, or was it unjustified killing? Like, murder in war happens. The exact example I gave, because it was caught on camera, because cameras are fucking everywhere now, was the man with his hands up and with a white flag in his hand, who was literally killed by a sniper. There's no way you can justify that in any fucking legal setting whatsoever. It's clear and obvious that that person had given themselves up. They had a white flag on a stick in their hand. They were shot dead. That's not an unjustified killing. That's not some collateral damage bullshit. That's fucking murder. Now, that's one example, of course. The idea that you're going to try and well, actually, bro, definition, your way out of 30,000 civilian deaths is,
Hold up.
again,
I'm
it's
sorry. Just before
that's one hell
that's
of a
not
hill
true.
to die
Hold
on.
up. Hold up. Stop. That's not true. It's not 30,000 civilians dead. It's 30,000 dead. That's a different statement.
Okay. I would hazard a guess that you are referring to the fact that Israel claims X number of people amongst those are terrorists or are combatants, enemy
Do you
combatants.
dispute that? Wait, hold on. Do you dispute that there are
No, there
enemy
are probably
combatants that have
some
been killed?
there are probably some a number of them, but the way that Israel has defined that as anyone from the ages of I forget the exact, it's something like 15 to 50. All men in that age range are considered to be enemy combatants, which is fucking despicable because of course majority of those will not be.
Not true. No, Kevin, that's not true. It is everyone who is of that age cohort and is also within a specific region that they've had months to leave and have been told to leave.
Okay, but literally we've seen when asked to leave convoys of people having missiles fired at them by the IDF. We have seen the areas they have gone to being fired at. We now have the ultimate, which is them being pinned up against the border fence at Rafah, and the Israeli government literally slavering to go in there.
Stop. Let's take this piece by piece. You said that it's unreasonable to say that these people that they're defining as being combatants are, generally speaking, combatants. When you're talking about people in a location that they have had ample time to leave and have chosen not to leave,
because they live there.
Hold up.
They live there.
And that is a location. Hold up. And that is a location known to be harboring terrorists. And that is a location they've had time to leave but have chosen not to. At this point, I don't think that it's unreasonable to call them to be engaged with Hamas. I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
No, they live in this fucking town. The IDF have no jurisdiction there. What are you talking about? If they get killed, that death is on their fucking hands. I'm sorry, they don't have to fucking leave.
It's a war.
It's not really a war, is it? The Palestinian people have no real way of defending themselves. Hamas do to a degree, but it's barely a war. It's barely a war because for a start off, Israel doesn't even fucking recognize Palestine as its own fucking independent country.
Kevin, I want to be crystal
How is it a war?
Hold up. If what you mean by it's barely a war is that Israel could nuke the entirety of Gaza and wipe it off the face of the earth tomorrow, then yeah, it's not a war.
That's clearly not what I mean. But
hold up. But unlike Hamas, Israel does not, in its charter or constitution, have the desire to destroy every single innocent Gazan, right? And so therefore, unlike Hamas, who, if given the same opportunity, would clearly nuke all of Israel, Israel is not willing to do that to the Gazan people. So the only reason that any of this is happening, that any of the fighting is happening as it exists on the ground today, is because instead of being willing to do that, Israel would rather send its own sons and daughters into combat. Some of them will die, some of them have died, in order to be involved in this fighting, as opposed to doing the simpler option, which would simply be to nuke the entirety of Gaza off of the face of the earth.
Are you suggesting that we should be like super duper grateful to the Israeli government for not being absolute fucking psychopaths and nuking nuking in a way that would obviously affect them as well from fallout? No, but I'm not going to give them like the benefit of the doubt. They're just bombing the shit and have killed fucking 30,000 people. But thankfully they hadn't glassed the place, so we should be grateful to them.
I'm trying to take this piece by piece. You said that
you're trying to minimize a fucking genocide is what you're actually doing.
I'm trying to take this piece by piece. You said that these people are not involved with Hamas if they're in a location.
No, they're not necessarily so. No, they're not necessarily so.
Stop.
Well, don't put words in my fucking mouth then. I didn't say that.
2 points. Let me finish my 2 points before you continue. Okay? One, you said that these people who are involved in locations, and I want to be clear, these are not towns as a whole, these are individual buildings where known to be harboring Hamas, that they have been told had ample time to leave, but have chosen not to over a period of not days, not weeks, but months, okay, that they have had time to leave, that these people you're claiming are not military combatants, and that it is unreasonable to call them military combatants when you're counting the numbers of people who are dead. Number one, that is ridiculous. Number two, you called it not a war. That too is absurd. The fact that Israel could end the war by simply wiping their enemies, quote unquote, off of the map, which is to say Hamas off the map, but also in doing so, 2.2 million innocent Gazans, that they're not willing to do that doesn't mean that it's not a war. It is a war.
Well, hallelujah! They've only bombed 30,000. Awesome. What a weird hill to die on. Ironically, secondly, it's not just individual buildings;
really
it's entire blocks of cities. Well, no, because I think your point is so risible that I don't feel like it's beneath refutation. It's silly. You're being fucking silly right now.
It's beneath refutation to say that it's a war.
No. I said it's
simple
barely a war. I said it's barely a war.
Doesn't mean that
For
I'm
instance,
demanding you take a side of the war. It's simply saying it's a war. That's
no,
all
but
I'm
you
saying.
clearly have taken
war.
you've clearly taken a side in the war. That's
Of
the
course,
point I'm
I've
making.
taken a side.
Yeah.
Kevin, I've taken a side in terms of the conflict. Yes, obviously. But when I say it's a war, that's not taking a side. That's a truth claim, right?
Okay, and I said it's barely a war in as much as it's not really two nation states, because, for instance, they don't have an air force, they don't have a navy, they barely have any armed forces. Apparently they have amazing burrowing technology like fucking moles, because everywhere has tunnels. Apparently every fucking hospital in the fucking in Gaza apparently had a network of fucking rabbit warrens underneath it that Israel just had to bomb, apparently. Regardless of the fact that it had fucking, newborn babies in it and stuff.
Hamas has an annual budget of $2 billion.
Right.
Like, spare me the bullshit where they're not able to be... Like, I understand that they're not on the same scale as Israel. That's certainly true. But they're not like these nothings. And by the way, okay...
This is the point. It's Hamas that have a
Hamas
have a defense. The Gazan people do not.
It's my turn. Number one, they have $2 billion a year. Okay, they're not some nothing. Number two, when I say something is a war, you don't just engage in war against states. There are other things that we've gone to war against in the past. We've gone to war against the Taliban in the past. The Taliban
which was a
not
government.
A state. It was a non-state actor at the time, and yet you can.
No, it was the government. No, it was
non-state actor.
It was the government of Afghanistan.
The Taliban was into a much less intense degree in control over their territories than Hamas is in control.
Okay, I didn't say they were a strong government. I said they were the government. So that is you essentially de facto invading and removing the government of the place.
Fine. Then who is closer to being the government of Gaza prior to the 7th than Hamas?
No, Hamas are the government. Yeah, that's fine. But my argument isn't that Hamas can't defend themselves. My argument is that fucking people, the Gazan people, can't defend themselves, and it's innocent people who are being fucking murdered right now.
I'm going to throw a flag on the play here. Whether you want to call it a war, a conflict, a special military operation, I don't think it matters.
Denazify Gaza. Let's go.
Let's move on from that point. I'm more curious about the point, right? And this is to Kevin, right? I understand that there is a huge power disparity between Hamas and Israel, but does that, at the end of the day, matter? If an armless man challenges you to a duel, and then just starts biting at you, are you supposed to put your arms behind your back and bite back, or can you can you sock them one? Right?
No. To use your slightly odd analogy, the point would be that you would either say, Well, actually, no, that doesn't even fucking work because the Hamas obviously can hurt Israel, so they're not an armless group. But
but
to
they're
take on
someone
the
who is
person, to take on that
much
person is fine, but to kill 30,000 of his fucking people who live on his street, or well, it's a big street, 30,000, but in his town or whatever, is not okay. That's the point I would go with. Hamas are fucking scum, and I wish nothing but their eternal destruction. But what I will not put up with is the fucking deaths of tens of thousands of fucking people, so that Israel gets to fucking wave its dick around. And of course, Israel ultimately doesn't actually give a fuck about the hostages either. They've literally shot some of them. They've fucking attacked in the press the families who have called for stronger action on this and actually want their family members back. The Israeli government and the IDF don't give two fucks about this. It's an excuse they are using to further their Zionist aims. That's what's happening.
They don't give a fuck about the 1,000+ innocent civilians who were murdered. They don't give a
No,
fuck
I said the
about
hostages.
people who were...
No, I said the hostages. I said specifically the hostages. And actually, some of the propagandists clearly don't, because they lied about a lot of this stuff. Like, they made up stories about 40 babies being beheaded, or people being thrown into fucking ovens, which is disrespectful. No, stop telling me to fucking stop, just so you can have your silly, narrow definitions where you can actually... Oh, well, I'm going to what actually you, bro, into a new definition of what genocide is. It's ridiculous.
Is your claim... I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. Your claim is that the Israeli government doesn't care that the Israeli people were kidnapped by terrorists.
No, ultimately they don't. No. I mean, they've literally killed some of them that have been released that had white flags. We have seen them attacking the families of these people. This isn't like, they don't treat it with any amount of solemnity. There's no respect for these fucking people. They are a tool. They are a PR tool to get good PR, which Israel is in desperate need of course, because they keep doing this genocide, which gives them bad PR around the world, and so people feel sorry. That's a natural reaction that people have, because we, as compassionate people of the world, give a fuck about these people and want to see them return safely to their homes, okay? The Israeli government couldn't really give two fucks. They have been bombing indiscriminately and have probably killed many of them.
They've not been bombing indiscriminately.
Okay, I'm going to give the ball to Quibbles for a little bit, okay? Yeah. Quibbles, go ahead.
Okay. Number one, obviously Israel is not bombing indiscriminately. We know that's not true because we've both already agreed that if Israel wanted to bomb indiscriminately, the war would be over tomorrow. They could wipe all of Gaza off of the face of the earth tomorrow.
Well, no, so officially...
Stop. It's my turn. Shut up. I love you, but you have to be silent. Thank you. It is simply not true that this is indiscriminate, number one. Number two, okay, with that, it is also not true that Israel doesn't care about its own people being kidnapped. Obviously, they care. They care intensely, which is why this whole thing has happened. Prior to this, they did a trade negotiation where they gave 200 members of Hamas, plus over 200 members of Hamas, back to Hamas in exchange for one person who wasn't even a civilian, but was rather a member of the military.
Yeah,
right?
a member of the military,
Yeah, someone who they care about significantly less than kids, right?
No, I don't think that is the case. I think the IDF care about the IDF more than they care about random civilians, yeah.
Oh, good Lord. Kevin, honestly, do you honestly believe that? You honestly think that the Israeli government, which is, democratic.
Just take him at his word at this point. He said it a few times.
Yeah, look.
All right, I'll take him at his word. It's insane. And it's insane to think that the hundreds of people who have been kidnapped matter less than the one person who was kidnapped, who they responded with this massive tectonic shift. Arguably, the fact that they did that release program is part of the reason that October 7th was possible in the first place, and yet they did it because they cared that intensely about one hostage.
Yeah, one military hostage. Yeah, they don't seem as bothered about getting the civilians back alive, particularly.
They're a democratic country.
Well, within reason, yes. Yeah, there are some issues, but they're a democratic
No,
country.
no, not really. They are simply a democratic country. If you're talking about Israel proper, they are simply a democratic country. There's not really that much nuance.
Okay.
They're actually arguably they're more democratic than we are because they don't have an electoral college.
Well, yeah. Again, America is.
Well, I don't want to get into
Anyway, yeah,
electoral
that's
college
yeah.
debate. That's beyond the scope.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, but I only said it because I'm sure all three of us agree about the electoral college. But
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. I've forgotten the point I was going to make now before you said stop. My mind has gone blank. To be fair, it is nearly 1 a.m.
It is.
When did I try and interrupt? Try and jog my memory.
Oh God, like there's been
So
so
many
many.
times, Kevin.
Hold on. Both of you have been interrupting all night, which is, I mean, it's fine. It's robust discussion. I think a good, healthy back and forth is great. I think maybe.
Indiscriminate.
Maybe if you're,
indiscriminate nuclear.
Indiscriminate bombing. Go ahead.
Nuclear, right, okay. So, firstly, it would be good if the Israeli government, as both you and I accept, have nuclear weapons, if they'd accept that and allow IEA investigators in to check that that's okay, in the same way that every other nuclear power outside of North Korea do. That would be fucking cool. But regardless of that, secondly, they don't use nuclear weaponry because that would be absolutely indefensible and would lose them basically all international support. Whereas they have plausible deniability of using conventional munitions, be it via aeroplane or regular artillery or whatever, to shell as they see fit. Anyone who looks at the towns of rubble, we've all seen. There's plenty of drone footage. It's one of the amazing technological breakthroughs in war that we can bring into you now. The destruction of entire fucking cities, via the drone. We've all seen that footage. You can't argue that's some sort of precision bombing campaign. That is the deliberate destruction. We've literally seen them using controlled demolition on the Parliament building, on the University of Gaza building. These are things that Israel has purposefully destroyed.
Okay. With that said, I want to give Quibbles a chance to refute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So to the first point of they couldn't literally use a nuke, I was using nuke sort of proverbially. You're right. They wouldn't literally use a nuke. If they wanted to do what I'm describing, they would carpet bomb the entirety of it. Carpet bombing would get the same effect, but it would not have the same international implications. They would not be a pariah state in the same way. They could probably get away with it. Okay. So the broader point is they aren't willing to do that. And the fact that they're not willing to do that is a fundamental difference, right?
Hold on,
because
hold on, Quibbles. Maybe this is my fault. So, Kevin has made an assertion that the way that they are conducting the bombing currently, and he's given some examples with the drone footage where you see massive amounts of destruction. How is that not indiscriminate?
If it were indiscriminate, then the number wouldn't be 30,000. The number would be 2.2 million. Because we've both established that if they wanted to take out the entire country, even if it weren't through nukes literally, but would rather through carpet bombs, they could take out the entire country. So the fact that they're not doing that implies that they're not doing it indiscriminately, which means they're doing it discriminately. And so that begs the question, okay, there are two possible goals of theirs that get you to 30,000 dead. One goal is that they've decided that these very specific civilians deserve to die. That's one possibility. The much more likely possibility is these specific people need to die because these specific people are terrorists, right? And so if that is their goal, which it very much seems to be the case, that's why they're focusing overwhelmingly in the north. That's why they're overwhelmingly focusing on trying to take out individual buildings rather than entire areas. You are citing specific areas, which it is true that there have been very few, but some larger places like blocks even of areas that have been destroyed. That is true, but there are also blocks that are being controlled by Hamas, that those places are being used as headquarters by Hamas. And so when you're talking about that, this is quite clearly a discriminate bombing. And so the question is, what is it that you think is the basis for their discrimination in bombing campaigns? Is it because they have specific civilians that they want to kill? And if so, which civilians and why?
I don't think they specifically give two fucks about which individuals they kill. Or even indeed if they kill any. If they could just get the Palestinians to just leave, go into the Sinai or whatever, they'd be happy with that because they're doing an ethnic cleansing. And I think we can see that because they've done stage by stage by stage a campaign of destruction, purposeful destruction of civilian infrastructure. Not just Hamas infrastructure, not just buildings with tunnels, because again, there have been buildings that they have controlled demolition, self-admittedly controlled demolition, that they have not made any claims were occupied by Hamas or that had any tunnels underneath or around them at all, right? They have purposefully made impossible, which by the way is one of the definitions for genocide under the UN Convention, they've made the possibility of the continued life of people of northern Gaza impossible. Certainly in the short to medium term, because there's nowhere to go back to in a large number of places. The destruction has been, like you say, actually, you know what? It has been discriminate. It's been discriminate in that they have specifically destroyed buildings and areas of towns that they wanted to destroy, partly because of Hamas, I'm sure, but partly because they don't want people to be able to return to that place. It's ethnic cleansing.
Okay,
that's what I'm suggesting.
Why don't they want people to be able to move to those specific places? And if that were the case, why wouldn't they be focusing specifically on places next to the border? Because if they were going on places next to the border, it would be the places that are much more easy to fold into Israel proper if that were their goal.
I think the long-term... Well, actually, I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu has a long-term strategy because he doesn't see himself, quite rightly, as the long-term leader of Israel. He's just surviving day-to-day, week-to-week. But I think longer-term plan for the uber-Zionists, if you will, is that they want to make life in that place impossible so that they can then essentially say, this is unoccupied land now and allow settlements to begin there, is what I
Right, so
think.
that's my... Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. The question was, if that were their goal, to try to get specific locations to be depopulated in order to be repopulated with Jews from Israel proper, wouldn't they be focusing on locations that are directly on the border rather than places that are further inland?
Maybe, I guess. I mean, I don't know exactly in terms of the strategy here. I don't know exactly what their plan is. I can't tell you the exact action plan there.
Okay, but surely you've seen like the maps of where these bombs are going, and you've seen that these maps are, number one, overwhelmingly going to the north, not to the south, and number two, overwhelmingly going to the internal areas, the areas where the cities are, and the areas where there is a massive hubs of Hamas and large numbers of tunnels and large numbers of fighters, rather than the places that are on the border.
Right, but given the nature of the fact that basically everywhere they've bombed, they've claimed there's some sort of Hamas presence, which would be, borderline impossible given the number of places and the supposed number of people that the estimated number.
Piece by piece.
Oh, there's an estimated, at least at the beginning of the war, there's an estimated 20 to 40,000 Hamas operatives within Gaza, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Gaza is a dense place.
In a population of 2 million people, yeah.
Sure, but given the density and the areas required, like 40,000 throughout the city could, again, operate. Location-wise, it is feasible that there would be a lot of buildings.
Also, there have been reports.
Speculation.
Well, there have been reports of them literally paving over and blockading a specific road from north to south, which seems to me to suggest relatively imminent occupation of northern Gaza. I could be wrong. There could be some entirely innocent reason that they would literally seek not to allow that.
I don't understand where you're like. I don't understand what your goal is here. Like, you argued earlier
to stop murder, to stop the killing of fucking people.
Let me finish the sentence. You argued earlier in this very conversation that you wanted an occupation. Okay.
Not by Israel, for fuck's sake.
Okay. You wanted it to be from the United Nations, not through Israel. But in order to do that, you're saying that laying the groundworks for that to be possible is somehow illegitimate for them to do?
Hang on, how does them flattening entire areas of cities aid any kind of third-party accusation?
That's not what you said. Stop. That's not what you said. What you said is something very specific. You said that they flattened individual roads in order to make those roads better accessible to tanks.
No, they've paved roads. No. They have blockaded a specific road from north to south to stop the south.
In order to gain, can I please finish? In order to gain a military control. If your goal for the Gaza Strip is for the United Nations to have that military control, your only two options are either A, for that control to be wrested from the Hamas terrorists by Israel or by the United Nations itself. Obviously, you don't want the United Nations itself to do it, and therefore you want Israel to do it. Yes?
No, I don't want Israel to do any of this. What the fuck? No.
You just
Israel
said
needs
Hold
to
on, hold on. You
fucking
gotta let him answer your
leave.
question.
an hour ago that
Quibbles,
you want
quibbles,
the United
quibbles,
Nations to do it.
quibbles, quibbles,
No.
quibbles. You asked
Look,
him a question. You have to let Kevin answer the question.
Israel needs to fucking leave, okay? Israel needs to leave the land that should be Palestine. That's my overall fucking point here. The idea that you could have any kind of sensible, it's not a solution. It's nothing. It's gibberish. It's pie in the sky. You might as well just say, I want Israel to be made out of chocolate. It's fucking nonsense. Israel occupying Gaza and setting up some sort of election in a place that has no fucking buildings to even have a polling booth or something like. It's stupid.
Lying?
It's fucking
That's
stupid.
a lie. You know it's a lie.
I'm not suggesting
there's
every
no
town has that, but also, where are the fucking people that were in that town? There are no people in the town.
That's a lie. Kevin, that was a lie. When you just said that it's impossible to run an election in terms of the physical infrastructure of
In
what
parts
is
of
in
northern
Gaza
Gaza,
today, that
it
is
would
a
be
lie.
impossible. It would be impossible.
It is no.
We've
it
seen
would
the
not
drone
be
footage.
impossible.
You couldn't hold a place there. No one fucking lives there anymore because there's
Evan,
nowhere to live.
Evan, this is a lie.
Okay.
I don't understand.
No, actually, northern Gaza's fine.
No
actually, they could just
there's no part.
they could just have a nice
No
super duper election. I'm sure.
There's no part of the Gaza Strip that is more than like it is a very dense location. There's no part that's more than like a mile and a half from places where you could have an election held. It's not true. The idea that you couldn't run an election isn't true. So don't say
You
it.
couldn't hold a
It's
fair
frustrating
election. You
when I'm
couldn't
trying to have a
hold anything
conversation.
like a fair election in a place where people fucking can't realistically live. There's no civil infrastructure. There's no
Kevin,
there are no
again,
fucking people living there.
Kevin, again, this is a general thing, okay? If I'm making a point about an individual point that you make, and then your response is not to respond to my point about that point that you made, but rather to go off about, oh, but this broader, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, that individual thing that you said was ridiculous. It was wrong.
No,
Don't
it isn't
say
fucking
things
wrong,
that
okay?
wrong.
There are places in northern Gaza where holding anything like a fair or indeed free election, given that you would have Israeli soldiers with fucking guns on the streets, I think that would certainly curtail civic engagement, shall we say. The idea that you would have anything like a free and fair election is absurd.
Okay, gang. Do you guys want to get to the apartheid one, or you want to keep going?
Apartheid,
You're
motherfuckers.
limited. We
Yeah.
do have
Before
a
we
limited
do-
window here.
Okay, before we do, I just want to
Concisely, please.
yeah, okay. The width of Gaza at its largest width, okay, is 6 miles wide. Okay? The furthest distance in the United States from a polling place, okay, is 17 miles in the United States.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. The idea that 6 miles, that there's any part of all of Gaza that's further than 6 miles, let alone 17 miles, from a place that you could do polling, is wrong. It's not true.
Okay.
Don't say things that are obviously not true.
Okay.
Okay, but no
Throw
one
us
lives
back.
in these fucking areas.
We're never gonna get to apartheid. We're never gonna get to apartheid if we keep going back and forth. So I'm gonna have
You
to.
want
to. You want to
get to apartheid? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I because again, I have limited time. And I want to make sure we cover the major points that I wanted to cover tonight. And apartheid is absolutely one of them. This has been an accusation leveled at Israel for a while by various bodies and humanitarian organizations, etc. Israel, of course, denies the claim. Where do you stand? And we started with Quibbles last time, so I want to start with Kevin this time. Kevin, is Israel an apartheid state, and why?
Unequivocally, 100%, yes, it is an apartheid state. What do I mean by that? Apartheid, obviously originally a South African term meaning aparthood. In other words, the separation of people based on either you can do it with race, religion, whatever. In this case, it would be with, I suppose, ethnicity. You have literally the physical apartheid of building a wall around Gaza, which is one very literal, robust form of apartheid. But you have the legal form of apartheid, which runs throughout the Israeli recent legal code, shall we say. You have the 2018 nation state law, which I mentioned earlier, which says that the right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. It also relegates Arabic to a what's called special status, with Hebrew being the official language, which is, again, in of itself wouldn't be necessarily the end of the world, but when you put it all together, it's there's clearly at least two-tier strata system within Israel. The 2022 citizenship law was a specifically disgusting piece of legislation which banned the naturalisation of Palestinian Arabs from becoming Israeli citizens, even if they'd married a pre-existing citizen of the State of Israel, which forced thousands to either flee the country or to live apart in terms of interracial marriage. Basically, practically speaking, making interracial marriage pretty much inconceivable in new marriages. Arabs within Israel are clearly treated and seen as second-class citizens. The way in which the Arab members of the Knesset are treated by other members of the Knesset, including the quote I gave earlier where he said, "You will die, your children will die, your grandchildren will die," that was shouted by Hanok Milbitsky at an Arab member of the Knesset. And that was fine. No sanction was ever taken against the man. Clearly and obviously, we have a two-tier citizenship status for Arabs and Jews inside Israel. And I think, given Israel's very, very strong connection, even during the times of the boycott of South Africa, apartheid South Africa, they were very closely linked because they were essentially running a similar system and saw each other as the last bastion outposts of acceptable apartheid in the world. And ultimately, if there's one person we can look to as a man who understands, not just in some theoretical sense, but in a very lived sense, what apartheid means, it would be Nelson Mandela, who said, "If I was to refer to any of the parties as a terrorist state, one might refer to the Israeli government, because they are the people who are slaughtering defenseless and innocent Arabs in the occupied territories, and we don't regard that as acceptable." If Nelson Mandela, as close to a deity as any living person in recent times, is on the side of the Palestinians against the apartheid state of Israel, I know where I stand.
Okay, first of all, Brittany Simon, thank you for the raid. Heavy topic today. We're discussing Israel and Palestine. I know it's been done, but there's been new. Since we've talked about it last, there's been other incidents and things that have happened. Thank you for the raid. I hope your stream went well. We are now on. We're getting to the end of the debate, and we're talking about is Israel an apartheid state? And we just heard the opening statement from Kevin Logan, and now we're going to hear the refutation by Quibbles over coffee. Okay, Quibbles.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Is Israel an apartheid state? Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to break this down into two separate categories. There's a question of the West Bank, and then there's the question of Israel proper. The West Bank, I think, is an occupation. I think if you're an occupation, it's different than being an apartheid situation. I want to be clear that I don't like occupations. I think that occupation currently, in the case of the West Bank, is the least bad option. But again, as we've discussed prior, I want to figure out a way of getting towards an Area B style rather than Area C style, and I want ultimately to get to an Area A style, hopefully, eventually. With that said, the two things that you listed, other than, again, some quotes which I don't know are particularly relevant, Hebrew is the official language and the citizenship laws. Hebrew is the official language. I just sort of reject out of hand, right? Like lots of countries have official languages. Having an official language doesn't mean that you're an apartheid system. It just means that you have an official language. The citizenship law component, Yes, or rather interreligious marriage is very difficult in Israel. Israel, this has been a long time criticism of progressive Jews, myself included. This has been something that we've been concerned of long before October 7th. The marriage system within Israel is controlled through the religious authorities, which is to say that it is controlled not just by Jewish religious authorities, but also by Muslim and Baha'i and Sikh and Druze authorities as well. I believe there's a couple of others, but those are the ones that I'm aware of. In that context, because they're through these religious authorities, those religious authorities only accept religious marriages that are within their religious group. And so therefore interreligious marriages are impossible. That said, it is possible to have those marriages accepted if they have been done outside of Israel. And so a lot of people, this has been historically what many gay people have done as well, who want to get married within Israel, will go to one of the surrounding countries, whether that be across Europe or whether that be in Egypt, wherever it might be, in order to get married with the person they want to. And once they are married to that person, those marriages are accepted inside of Israel proper. Now, I want to be clear. I oppose those laws. I think those laws are bad. But just because a law is bad doesn't make the law apartheid.
Okay, with that, we'll open it up.
Okay, but I mean, clearly, you're ignoring the fact that there's clearly like a two-tier system of citizenship here, right? This was not done for some, like, I don't know, silly reason. This is clearly in part with the Jewish supremacist state of Israel. Again, it's the sole control of the Jewish people in that specific law. So to the point where a Jewish person from New York or London or Moscow can go and get citizenship in Israel, but an Arab who marries a Jewish person in Israel doesn't get citizenship. That's clearly a two-tier system where some people have rights based on ethnicity or religion, and some people do not. This is an apartheid system. Yeah, like I know you don't support that law, but just saying I don't support the law doesn't change the fact that there is a two-tier system of citizenship.
Wait, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that having a immigration system that is encouraging some people to come into the country over other people in the country is apartheid?
No, I'm saying doing that solely on the basis of religion or ethnicity is apartheid, or part of apartheid. Yes. Yeah. Like,
Wait,
I've no problem with Israel encouraging skilled workers to go to Israel and encourage their society. I'm very pro-immigration. They are specifically saying to all Jewish people, regardless of where they're from or what skills they have or anything like that, to go, that they are allowed to go and have citizenship in Israel in a way that Arabs, even if they marry a Muslim, I should say, because it's religious, who marries an Israeli citizen, cannot. That is a racist two-tier citizenship system that you have there.
They're a refugee state of return. Is your proposal that because they were willing to save the Ethiopian Jews, that therefore they have an obligation to allow all refugees in?
No, I'm not arguing they should be. Oh, Jesus Christ! Right, they are allowed. A country is allowed. A country is allowed to have any immigration system it likes, but if it's done on specifically religious grounds, it's.
Before you answer my question, I want to lay it out fully.
Go on.
In the context of the Ethiopian Jews, right? They let in upwards of 200,000 Ethiopian Jews that were probably going to die if they hadn't done so. Okay. Ethiopia was a basket case at the time. There were lots of other people who were not Jewish who also, right, were in desperate need of figuring out some sort of situation so they wouldn't be in the situation that they're in currently in Ethiopia. If you're willing to take on some number of refugees, does it have to be 1 or 0? Do you have to accept every single refugee worldwide or no refugees in order for it not to be an apartheid system?
No,
or can you be selective?
It's not about refugees, is it? Let's say a Jewish person from my own hometown of Birmingham in England, right? let's say a Jewish person who is not a refugee, they would live perfectly soundly and upwardly mobile individual in Britain, can seek citizenship and be given citizenship in Israel just by dint of being Jewish, right? That's a thing that Israel allows for.
The basis of their policy is that they were born as a country out of a ethnic cleansing of basically every single Middle Eastern country other than Israel. They were born out of the Holocaust, and they were born into this moment.
I was about to say they were born out of the Holocaust, certainly, yeah.
And they were born out of this moment where Jews were under threat worldwide.
Mm.
As a result of the fact that they were born out of this moment where Jews were under threat worldwide, they built a policy that said, we are going to be a place that will, at a generalized level, no questions asked, protect Jews.
Okay, I mean,
is that apartheid?
There's a number of problems you have with that. Firstly, Zionism as a concept long predates the Holocaust, and indeed long predates any number of other things.
Stop.
No, not fucking stop. No fucking stop, all right? I'm going to say my piece here.
We're talking about law. We're not talking about Zionism as a general concept. The law that we're talking about, right, is not a law that predates the Holocaust.
How was that established? Can I just ask, how was that law established in Israel?
That law was established as one of the very first laws that they created as a government.
Yeah, but how was that government established? Is what I'm asking. Was that done in some peaceable?
First, the British Authority gave them the rights, and then after that, those rights were questioned by every surrounding country, and then there was a war.
Okay, so they did it essentially by conquest, because Britain doesn't get to act as the arbiter here. It's not a real estate agent that gets to give the land of a third people to the land of a second people. That's not how it works.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. An imperialist power was in control over all of what ought to be the land of the Palestinians, including modern-day Jordan, and all of the land that ought to be the land of the Jews, including all of modern-day Israel. That is true.
But again, that's very odd. The land of the Jews is a very odd. I don't know why it has to be some weird ethno-state.
The land of the Palestinians too, but unfortunately,
well, no, because Palestinian is based. Palestinian is Palestinian is it can be anything. You can be a Palestinian of any religion. You could be a Palestinian of any kind of ethnic background. Jew is a rather disparate thing, given the number of different religious strains, and indeed you don't even have to be religious. You could be just ethnically Jewish and not be religious at all. The land of the Jews is a very strange concept. There are lots of people who are Jewish who do not consider themselves to be in alignment with Israel, and indeed most Zionists are not Jewish. They're evangelical Christians in the United States.
Alignment with Israel. Okay. When I say something is the land of the Jews, that is not a statement of a place can be the land of the the Turks, or a land of whatever it might be, right? That doesn't mean that therefore every single Turk has an obligation to support the government therein.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
So when I say it's the land of the Jews,
right? But not all Turkic peoples get to go and live in Turkey.
Stop. When I say a place is a land of the Jews, that's not a governmental claim. That's a historic claim. It is simply true that the birthplace of Judaism is modern-day Judea, Samaria, and Israel. That is simply true.
Okay, well, the birth of Christianity is also true. So do the Christians get to claim it?
However, Christianity is not an ethnicity.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Christianity isn't an ethnicity.
Well, I mean...
I will say, absolutely, Wick was sort of joking there, but I will say, absolutely, that yes, Christians do have a right and do have have a right to have access to the Holy Sepulchre. They have a right to have access to the
No, the right to access. There's a difference between having right of access and calling it the land of the Christians. That's the thing I have a problem with.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Jews are an ethnicity that was born there. Christianity is not an ethnicity in the same way, right? There are Samaritan Jews. There are Semitic Jews.
Yeah.
There are Samaritan Christians rather, and there are Semitic Christians as well. But unlike Judaism, Christianity is not an ethnicity, right? And so it is different.
Okay, so you're arguing
Muslims are
in
also not.
favor. You're arguing in favor
Muslims are also not an ethnicity.
of an
But
ethno-state. Then
Palestinian is.
you're literally
No,
arguing in
no.
favor of an ethno-state.
I'm not. I'm arguing that people of a location have a right to go to the location when they are otherwise going to be killed.
But they're not from that location. A Jewish person
They are.
from Warsaw or London is not from Tel Aviv or
Kevin,
Jerusalem.
Okay.
That's the point I'm making here.
Help me. Okay.
And if you're arguing that they should be allowed in just
Kevin,
on the basis of them being Jewish, you're literally arguing
Kevin,
for a fucking ethno-state.
Kevin, walk me through this, okay? Here's a person. They just survived the Holocaust.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Just survived the Holocaust. The Holocaust is over now. However, literally everything that they've ever owned was stolen from them during the Holocaust.
Yes.
They are now penniless, they are jobless, and they have, PTSD, obviously, and they also have lots of physical ailments as a result of the Holocaust. Okay. They grew up in Poland.
Yeah.
Is this a Polish person?
Well, they're a Polish citizen, certainly. I mean, unfortunately, one of the problems with the disgusting anti-Semitism of the 1920s and 30s was the idea of Jewish people being some outside thing, unfortunately.
Right, so are they Polish?
Yes. They're a Polish citizen, that's the point I'm making, yes.
Do the Polish
and they
people
keep
consider-
dual citizenship, by the way, as well. So that's, they are
the
literally
Polish
both
people
Polish
consider-
and Israeli, yeah.
Do the Polish people consider them to be Polish?
Probably not, but I don't really give a fuck about racists, in all honesty.
Okay,
I don't
but
take
these are
the...
people.
I don't, they're...
Okay, but Kevin, obviously they're not welcome in Poland, right?
Yeah, I can understand
This is
them
in the
wanting to leave.
context of
I
just
can see
immediately after
Jewish.
World War II.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, we're talking
I can
right after
see.
World War II.
I can absolutely see why people would want to coalesce and to find a safe place. But I don't know why the crimes of European Christians have to be paid for with the blood and land of Palestinian people who didn't, like, Palestinians didn't operate Auschwitz.
Kevin, I'm taking this piece by piece. Okay, again, I don't like you keep on making these like massive ballooning stick. I just want to keep piece by piece, just tick by tick by tick. Okay. So we agree that that it is reasonable for them to have to understand that it is difficult for them to be conceptualized as being Polish.
Yeah,
right?
I guess so.
But they are primarily being conceptualized as being Jewish, not being conceptualized as being Polish.
Yeah.
Okay. So as someone who is primarily conceptualized as Jewish rather than Polish, okay, you're not welcome in Poland. What is Jewland?
Well, I mean, there wasn't a Jew land, was there? But again,
there actually was. There was a place called Judea, actually.
Well, I mean, again, how far back do you want to go? Like, technically,
The
does
place that was called Judea.
every human being get to go back to Kenya and say, well, humanity started in the Great Rift Valley? Like, how fucking far back do you go before you just end up in fucking madness where everyone can claim any bit of land? Because we all came from somewhere at some fucking point. It's ridiculous. Now, I'm not suggesting that Jewish people shouldn't be able to live in those lands. And, by the way, the argument that they have some sort of historic right and therefore this specific piece of land is the only piece of land that Zionism could take is ridiculous. Because, of course, there were plans for other territories, including parts of Canada. There was suggestion that maybe a part of the American desert in the fucking west could be there. There was a Uganda plan, I think, at one point. It's a very modern addition to Zionism that this specific place is the only place that Jewish people can be safe in.
That's not true. It's not modern that Jews have always been praying to the Kotel. It's not new that Jews have always considered Jerusalem to be the holiest city in our religion. It's not new that we have always it simply is the home of the Jew. It's not new.
No. I'm not suggesting that Jewish people have some sort of connection to that territory. I'm suggesting the concept that the only place where Jewish people can be safe, the only place we could build any kind of homeland for the Jewish people, has to be this one tiny little strip. here, right, this tiny little bit, that was added to a more generic Zionism which has existed for hundreds of
When I
years.
say somewhere is okay, when I say somewhere is the home of the Jews,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that the home of the Jews is the only place that a Jew could live. Obviously, that's not true. I
Exactly, yeah.
currently live in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That is a different statement than the question of what is the home of the Jews, to which the answer is the place where Judaism happened. The answer is the place where all of these
But again,
people
the place
came
where
from.
it's the place where Christianity happened. It's the place where
No, but
it's the
no,
place
Kevin,
where
that's not
Muhammad
parallel.
took his night flight to fucking Jerusalem, right?
Kevin,
All
that's not
three,
parallel.
all three,
Christianity
all.
isn't an ethnicity. It's not parallel.
So you are arguing for the
literally,
allowance of ethnically
literally,
based immigration into a
go back,
place. You are arguing directly for an ethno
if you
state.
go
That is
back
what you are
enough
doing.
generations, if you go back enough generations, the overwhelming majority of Jewish people, modern Jewish people, whether they're from Ethiopia purportedly, whether they're from Egypt purportedly, whether they're from Poland purportedly, if you go back far enough, it is very obvious the overwhelming majority of us do in fact have lineage that extends back to Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, that is
Okay.
not true of Christians. That is not true of Muslims. It is true of Jews.
Okay,
Just Jews.
Well, no, actually, no,
right?
not
And
just Jews.
Palestinians.
There are plenty of Muslim people who've lived there for a very long time
Yes,
as well.
as an ethnic group, it is true of Palestinians.
Yes.
It is true of the people who were permitted to stay there after the Jews were ethnically cleansed, and it is true of the Jews who were ethnically cleansed.
Yes. No, absolutely, and I've got no
Okay.
problem with that. But you
So-
don't
okay.
get, but just on the basis of this argument that you have that the Jewish people are an ethnicity, which is undoubtedly correct. If you're arguing that certain ethnicities, i.e., in this case the Jews, are allowed specific rights that other groups based on ethnicity or religion alone are not, you are arguing explicitly for apartheid, you are arguing explicitly for an ethno-state, which makes you little better in reality, in practical reality, than a fucking neo-Nazi or a Hindu nationalist beating up fucking Muslims in northern India. It's the same basic shit. It's the same nasty supremacist garbage.
I'm going to have to let the Quibbles respond to that uninterrupted. You made some
By all
accusations.
means.
Go ahead.
Okay, again, I want to take this piece by piece because, again, you keep on just exploding into 50,000 different points simultaneously, which is called a gish gallop. Okay, that's what Destiny taught me. It's called a gish gallop.
Oh, wow, you've got Destiny brain rot. Excellent work.
Okay, hold on. Quibbles,
you interrupted me. How dare you?
Quibbles, get to your point.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. When I'm bringing up this ethnic component, the reason that I'm bringing it up is I'm explaining the basis for why Israel was founded in the first place and why it built the rules that it did. It was built literally by Holocaust survivors. It was built literally by people who were ethnically cleansed, not just from Poland and Germany, but from across the Middle East as well. In the aftermath of that, there is a particular understanding that those Jews had of what it means to be Jewish and under threat. And part of protecting Jews, they correctly assessed, is unfortunately recognizing the fact that there are others who do want to destroy Jewish people, whether that's in Poland or in Germany, etc. And therefore, they made this law that said, hey, listen, if you're a Jew and you're under threat, we will protect you. And that is a blanket rule across the board, no questions asked.
Do Jewish
people in Ethiopia, across the board. I'm not done. Shut up. I love you. Be silent. Therefore, if that's the rule that you're coming to, you have to ask the question of whether or not you can make a statement that people who live in Israel are committed to the people who live in Israel being treated equally, and whether or not that statement is contradictory to the statement that Jews specifically must be protected by Israel and that Jews specifically must be permitted as refugees into Israel. Does letting a Guatemalan into America mean that we're a Guatemalan supremacist country?
No, but you're not excluding everyone but or not excluding. Okay, you're not specifically saying to all Guatemalans you can come in. For instance, do you, as a Jewish person in
If we
Pittsburgh,
did,
as a Jewish person in Pittsburgh, do you feel like there's going to be a pogrom anytime soon against you?
I don't think there's going to be a pogrom against us. However, there was a mass shooting against us,
There
and
was
also
indeed.
the number the number of anti-Semitic attacks since the 7th have skyrocketed by 337%.
Okay, but do you feel that you are in need of refuge?
I personally am committed to the United States of America. I have spoken to a lot of other Jews who are reasonably terrified, and I think that there is reason for them to take comfort in the fact that there is a place that they will be protected.
Will they be protected? This is ultimately the point. I mean, after October 7th
There
and,
is a
and rest
there
of
is a government who is committed to them being protected. Yes.
well, again, are they committed to being protected? Because again, when we've seen people being released, the Israeli government have shot those people. This has happened. The Israeli government has shown itself singularly incapable of protecting its people. I don't
Okay.
think you can realistically say that you, as a
Okay.
Jewish person in
There are
Pittsburgh,
200,000.
are under more danger in Pittsburgh than you would be in Kiryat Shimon or wherever, one of these border towns. Also, just on the
Okay.
point of oh fuck, my mind's gone blank again. I do apologize.
Well, let him
Yeah.
try to remember that. Let him deal with it. We are coming up at the end of this, so this is going to be like the last back and forth, and we're going to closing statements.
So,
But go ahead.
okay, there are right now today 164,000 Ethiopian Jews living in Israel.
Okay.
By comparison, there are basically zero living in Ethiopia itself. I think it is safe to say that those 164,000 Jews living in Israel would be dead had Israel not saved their lives. Is that fair?
A fair chunk of them, yes. Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of them.
Yeah. That we got lots and lots of people would be dead otherwise. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you think it's fair to say that of the Egyptians,
What do you mean, sorry?
the Egyptian Jews?
Oh, Egyptian Jews. Yeah. Look, don't get me wrong. There are lots of countries around the world in which Jewish people are genuinely under threat.
So
Yes.
Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Germany, right? You can throw in Poland there. You can probably throw in much of Russia. You can throw in Ukraine. You can throw in a lot of these places, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying that
So-
Jewish people aren't facing threats, but lots of people are
Okay,
facing
so-
threats. And if you're doing it just on
Okay,
the basis of
yes,
keeping an ethno-state, and just for instance, we've seen literally the case of being described as preserving the Jewish character of Israel. So they're literally doing it for specifically ethno-nationalist reasons, not just to protect Jewish people, but specifically for the propagation of an ethno-nationalist endeavor.
Okay. I agree that the refugee crisis of Syria on the border of Israel, horrible, right? Surely you'd also agree that the refugee crisis of Syria, which is something that Germany did something about, but not that much about, lots of other places did something about, but not that much about, was an example of a refugee crisis. Sorry?
I was just going to say Britain did something about it by making it significantly worse.
Significantly worse. That's definitely true. Yeah, I blame you personally for that, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I do think that yeah, refugee crises are horrible, but I don't think that every single government is responsible for every single person worldwide. I think that instead, that governments get to pick and choose who they want to bring into their country at a base level. That's sort of the concept of what a state is. And if you believe in that as a principle, then part of that is that if they're allowed to choose what they're going to who they're going to bring in, they're allowed to choose who they're going to bring in, right?
Well, yeah, but again, it's the point of it being ethnically based. I opposed Donald Trump's Muslim ban shite in the United States for the same basic reason, and I would oppose it if it happened here as well. I don't think we should. I don't think we should be checking. I don't think we should be checking the religion or ethnicity of the person at the. It should be done on the basis of need and our ability to take people in. That's the point. And in Israel, it isn't. There's a blank check to all Jewish people, regardless of whether they're under any threat. Look, if you're a very well-to-do Jewish person, you can move to Israel. You're under no real threat. You live a very happy, safe life in some part of the world. You can still go to Israel. That's clearly not the same as it would be for an Arabic person or whatever, right? Some other ethnicity. That's ethno-nationalism, man. That's a two-rail citizenship system. It is apartheid.
Okay. You're allowed
Last
as a country.
response and closing.
Yeah. You're allowed as a country to choose who you want to come into your country. That is not an example of apartheid. When we talk about apartheid, apartheid is about the lived reality of your citizens once they are citizens. That is a different thing than who you choose to bring into the country. It is not classist to say that we only want doctors and nurses and engineers and shit to come into our country. That's not classist. That's acceptable. That's perfectly legitimate for a country to do. You're allowed to do that. You can be conscious and choosy, picky about who you do and do not.
Yeah, but you haven't put a blank check out to doctors.
Let me finish.
Yeah,
and so when you are choosing who you bring in, that is ethical. The fact that Israel has consciously chosen and spent billions of dollars to do so, and risked their relationship with Ethiopia to do so, risked their standing within the rest of the Middle East to do so. The fact that they've saved literally hundreds of thousands, at this point over 1 million Jews, by bringing those Jews into Israel, is not something that they ought to be condemned for. And it is not apartheid to be trying to save Jews. That's not true.
It's not just a matter of saving Jews. Well, can I just get back on one? I mean, this is quite a big thing, but I do need to push back on this. When you were giving your potted history of the establishment of Israel, you failed to mention that it was also established through significant bloodshed and terrorism by Jewish terrorist gangs as well. There were bombs going off in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem long before Hamas were ever a thing.
Yes, that's true. There were terrorists on either side, and yes, that's absolutely true. For sure.
Gang, this has been quite the robust discussion. I appreciate both of these parties here for coming in and going through the points and having this talk. I want to allow them to tell people where they can find themselves, as well as give closing thoughts on this. And we're going to start with Quibbles, and we're going to let Kevin have the last word here. Quibbles, give where people can find you if they'd like to find you, and closing thoughts on the conflict and Israel as a whole. Go ahead.
Okay. At Quibbles C on various places. That's where you find it. My final thoughts. This is actually not to do with Israel-Palestine, so I apologize, but it is my final thought of the evening. Earlier today, I came into this rather frustrated, not at Kevin, but at Twitter, because I think that we're, and this isn't actually really something to do with Israel-Palestine, but I think that we are doing a bad job of thinking about the impacts of our rhetoric on Jews and Muslims specifically living in the United States and living outside of Israel-Palestine. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but since October 7th, there has been an increase of 337% in hate crimes against Jews and 180% against Muslims in the United States. I think that we need to understand that there are limitations on what are appropriate ways to speak about these kinds of issues and what are appropriate types of protests to engage in. So there has been very recently an example of someone or a group of people protesting outside of a shul, outside of a synagogue, a Jewish prayer space. And I think that we just need to have it as a blanket rule. Some things are off limits. I think that we just need to agree that protesting outside of a kindergarten is off limits, that protesting outside of a funeral is off limits. And I think that in addition to that, I would also add that just as a principle, that if you're the one who is burning a cross in front of a black church, you're in the wrong. If you're the one who is talking, making it impossible for people to pray to God in peace, you are in the wrong. And the stochastic terrorism conversation is often thrown around. And sometimes it's unfairly thrown around. But at the base level, it simply is true that the terrorism has increased against both Muslims and Jews. And if you are a decent person, you have to understand that that as a base level is bad. And so I would argue that, yeah, don't do that. Don't protest a mosque and don't protest a shul.
Can I just chip in? Are you referring to the synagogue in Toronto specifically? Yeah.
Yeah, among others.
Yeah,
I don't want to. Again, these are closing statements. Oh my god! But
okay, but that's
brief.
Okay, right. That was a group of actually largely Jewish people who were campaigning outside of that synagogue, and that was because there was a real estate company from Israel that was selling specifically houses in the West Bank to just Jewish people in Canada.
It's actually not true. But even if it were true, I would still be principally opposed to it. But it's actually not true. Those were in Tel Aviv. They were not in the West Bank.
Okay, I don't actually know. Kevin?
Yes. Okay. This was honestly a little bit cancerous. I feel dispirited, I think, albeit that this was a fun discussion. Anyway, let's get on to the thing. Israel is doing a genocide. It is an apartheid state. It needs to cease, both of those things, and a two-state solution needs to be established. And if you found anything I had to say of worth or knowledge or just interesting, you can find me at KFLogan1875 here on Twitch and on various other platforms. Peace.
Okay, thank you for being here. We're going to rate out. I'll see you guys later. Have a great day, Quibbles and Kevin, and peace out.
No.